The United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defense of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the Marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning to you. Are you having a good day today? Looking forward to the weekend and everything the future days are going to hold for you. I bet Sir Keir Starmer isn't. Where is he? Got into a bunker. He's not going to address Parliament until Monday. Well, we all know why. It's because he wants to hide away and lawyer all over the mess that he has gotten himself into. Because it doesn't add up, does it? I'm sorry, but even if somehow, the vetting was done and he wasn't cleared and they, for whatever reason, who needs logic? Heaven forfend common sense. Even if they decided somehow, well, we're just not going to tell anyone he didn't actually pass the vetting. That wouldn't have happened, I'm certain. When someone is vetted for a role and they don't pass it, I'm pretty sure the next step is saying, by the way, your pick to be the highest diplomatic appointment in the land is not allowed to be. So, apparently that didn't happen. And Starmer just didn't know anything about this. But since the time he said to Parliament, yes, the vetting was all done, due process was followed, of course he omitted the fact that the vetting wasn't passed. Apparently didn't know. But if you would have thought then he might have summoned the documents, he might have asked to see what actually went on, because this was months ago. This was months ago. But no, it's a surprise yet again to him. Well, no one's told me yet again. Why is no one telling you anything, Prime Minister? Are we supposed to believe this? I think it sounds like the dog's eating your homework, son. Well, I'm joined now by the brilliant Emma Trimble, writer and broadcaster.
Thanks for having me, Alex. This is nice, isn't it? Seeing each other in person.
It's boiling in here, though. I think the aircon's gone on, and I think this might end up being like a striptease special edition of the show.
Yeah, I think for viewers, the way to describe it is, it's like when you've just come out of the aeroplane in a nice hot country and you get hit by a wall of air. That's what the studio feels like.
Or what it feels like under Sir Keir Starmer's collar right now. One would think.
Quite.
But nothing is stacking up. Either this is the most absent of responsibility, doesn't know what's going on in his own cabinet, makes terribly poor judgments, and nobody seems to tell him. And so he is just one giant calamity magnet. And so he keeps having to fire everyone around him because, well, it's the chief of staff's fault ×2. Well, it must be the head of the cabinet office. Well, it must be this person. Well, it's everyone else but me. And it turns out all the people who are supposed to know these things, they didn't know either. Not David Lammy, not Yvette Cooper, certainly not the Prime Minister. Nothing adds up.
Yeah, bit of a muck-up, isn't it? Because in the best-case scenario is that the civil service has gone rogue here and have chosen to override the intelligence when it came to that security vetting. Seems a bit unlikely, though, doesn't it? And also, as Kemi Badenoch has pointed out, if a Prime Minister misleads Parliament, he has to correct the record at the earliest opportunity. That would have been Prime Minister's questions. He didn't do that. He also very clearly said to Parliament that Mandelson had passed the security vetting. He implied to Parliament he had been vetted and therefore it was above board that he'd been appointed.
Well, that's the thing. He sort of said he has gone through the independent vetting procedure, which isn't technically a lie.
So did he say it in those terms in order to mislead Parliament, or did he say that genuinely not knowing what the outcome of that security vetting was? I mean, to me, that just seems highly unlikely.
What's ironic is I think he probably said it in order because he's a lawyer. This is what he does as a living, and when you look at some of the people
not on top of the detail, interesting.
But when you look at some of the people he's represented, you know, he's used to defending the indefensible. It's rather up his strata, and this is the thing about lawyers. They can say, "Well, look, you have to prove that I wasn't, you know, I was given this document." Again, circumstantial happenings, circumstantial goings on, but they're only circumstantial. The disappearing phone. Not only has the phone of Morgan McSweeney conveniently got stolen, and he also happens to give a street address that was the same but not the street he was in, so there's no CCTV footage of the incident taking place. But because then when he reported the phone as missing, they've had to remotely wipe it all. I mean, you know,
it's all very
either
far-fetched.
Starmer is the unluckiest person in the world or somehow the luckiest.
It is very, very far-fetched, and I find it very difficult to believe. I mean, firstly, that he hadn't been informed by the Foreign Office about this decision, that this isn't something that had been run by him. Because can you imagine a situation in which Ollie Robbins and the Foreign Office, whilst all of this Mandelson scandal is unfolding, at no point, given that they're supposed to serve the government, at no point informed the government that Mandelson hadn't passed his security vetting.
By the way, so when he goes and says to Prime Minister's questions, well, he was vetted, at that point, did no one say, but he didn't pass it?
Yeah. It seems
they still kept it from him? No,
it seems completely infeasible that they wouldn't have said anything to the government. It just looks as if they're trying to make Ollie Robbins the fall guy. Apparently he said to his friends...
The most recent fall guy.
Yeah, and apparently he said to his friends he doesn't want to be the fall guy. Now, that's interesting because, I mean, presumably senior civil servants have to sign some kind of NDA. He'll probably be...
Well, if he is summoned in front of the Intelligence and Security Committee, then he cannot be gagged. If they say, we need you to come and testify and tell us the whole truth, nothing but the truth, he's got to do it. Well, the poor sucker who's been sent out on the so-called morning rounds this morning to go batting for the Prime Minister is no less than the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones. Let's have a listen to what he was saying.
He hasn't, because the process was followed. The process, as I explained, was that UK security vetting undertake investigations. They make a recommendation to the Employment Department, which is the Foreign Office in the case of an ambassador. And as I've said, the Foreign Office had this, in my view, unacceptable right to ignore that advice. That had been an established process for some time. And when the Foreign Office granted the approval, and therefore the appointment of Peter Mandelson as ambassador, due process as it was followed.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it's just they're still doing it. They're still lying. I mean, it's not. This is the problem. It's not lying, but we can tell the difference between somebody being evasive, between giving only a certain amount of information to present a certain situation. But this is typical of his premiership. This is how it's been, I think, back to Southport. I think back to, well, there's been a whole host of things that's engulfed him and his poor judgment, especially when it comes to appointments. But what we have also seen repeatedly from this Prime Minister is the audacity of just barefaced, well, that's the thing, it's not lying, it's being very clever, deliberately evasive, selective with truth, selective with how you say things and what you say, so you're not technically lying, but I actually think evasion is a form of lying. You know, if there was, I don't know, a knifeman out there, and you know, everyone else was running for their lives, and I thought, I'm going to hide under the desk, but I'm not going to tell Emma. That isn't a form of lying. I've just not told you something, but actually it'd be in your interests to have that information.
Yeah, we're following the process is a form of evasion. We saw the same thing actually with the Axel Ruder-Cabana news in the last week. Yeah. The fact that they say, well, we were following the process, but clearly the process didn't work. It's just filling in tick boxes. You get this kind of, it's strange that they've all somehow taken on Keir Starmer's hollow automaton voice when they say we followed the process, insisting that we followed the process. But what that is doing is failing to take personal responsibility. The Prime Minister's failing to take personal responsibility. The civil service is failing to take personal responsibility, although at least in Ollie Robbins' case, even though he actually was appointed as the permanent secretary after Mandelson's appointment was already announced. By him resigning, he's sort of taken personal responsibility for presumably something he couldn't have been responsible for.
Maybe he's resigned because he wants to go and sing. And I don't mean like in a jazz club. I mean publicly.
As a crooner,
But this isn't the first time that this has happened. It's been, you know, incident after incident where Starmer says, I'm going to have to launch an independent inquiry, and after the findings of that investigation, I'll come and address Parliament. It is this concept. It's very legalistic. It's all about technicalities, loopholes, crossing T's, dotting I's in order to, by law, present a version of veracity that isn't complete, but, you know, still passes some sort of legal definitions test, but it doesn't pass the moral test, does it?
Yeah, and do they think the British public are dumb? Because all of this talk, again, like I say, of process, of inquiries and all of this, the public see that they're evading responsibility. The public see that they're covering their own backs. And public trust in our democracy is already at an all-time low. I mean, this government was elected on an historically low turnout in terms of who actually went to the polls and voted. I mean, they won, but they won with very, very few votes.
This is what's so farcical. When we look at the reasons why we had a succession of Conservative Prime Ministers, now, for the most part, it was faction fighting and game playing and, you know, parlour politics rather than actually policy making. But first of all, Boris Johnson went because he was supposed to have had cake after a certain time of day in a room that he had been in about a few hours before, but because a certain time had passed on the clock and it was during COVID, that was then not allowed. And it was all about whether or not he had said things to Parliament that were deliberately misleading people, that was deliberately obfuscating. And I think that this situation is much worse. Then, of course, you had the Liz Truss furore, where people said she's crashed the economy. Rachel Reeves, frankly, has taken a chainsaw and a mallet to the economy, and the blimmin' Ed Miliband's net zero obsession. And then you had just sort of the position of approval ratings and the public being disenchanted with politics with Rishi Sunak. All those three have not just been, you know, fulfilled by the Labour government, they have been maxed out.
Yeah.
It's sort of, you know, it's corruption maxing or something.
Corruption maxing, exactly. Yeah, they're corruption mogging.
Scandal maxing. Yeah.
They're sleaze mogging the Conservatives.
They are sleaze mogging.
Like, probably viewers might not know exactly what we're talking about there. But anyway, I think that, you know, I don't think that, I know that they did call for the Conservatives to resign over much less than this. I mean, they would never have accepted it as an excuse if Boris Johnson had said, oh, well, the civil service just didn't tell, I just wasn't on top of my brief, I just didn't really know what was going on. I mean, with such an important appointment, when we know that Keir Starmer received a dossier, even though that dossier contained all information that was already in the public domain about Mandelson, and that should have been enough for him to decide not to
appoint him. It was a terrible decision from the very moment it was made.
But we know from what has been given to the public so far from these Mandelson files that he was warned over and over and over again that this was a massive risk, and he still went ahead and did it. So why would he not be on top of his brief when it comes to whether or not Mandelson actually passed that security vetting. I mean, it is completely unbelievable. They must think that the British public are totally gullible. And I think we also have to see this in the broader context of the public's lack of trust for the government, for the ruling elite, for even to some degree the press, and also for the authorities. I mean, all of this stuff that we've seen in the last week around Epsom, the same as we saw in Southport. When there is a silence from the police, people start getting suspicious because they know that the authorities are withholding and have in the past withheld information from them in order to basically control the public's reaction. And this is just part of that same picture, that they feel that those who are supposed to represent them, elected representatives, the Prime Minister, is not being honest with the British public.
Well, we know he's playing us for fools. Apparently, so it's not just the Prime Minister, can I just say. Pippa Crerar on X, who's Guardian journalist, says that Yvette Cooper and her office only became aware that Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting. You got to laugh. When approached by the Guardian on Thursday, I'm told. Really?
I mean, that in itself is a scandal, surely.
You're the Foreign Secretary. Well, she wasn't at the time of his appointment, but there you go. The Foreign Secretary then spent the evening in the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office and Downing Street with the Prime Minister, where she spoke to Sir Ollie Robbins. They concluded he could no longer continue in post. It means Cooper, Lammy, McSweeney, Mandelson and the PM himself are all now saying they had no clue. I just want to read some of your messages here because you guys are astute. You're onto this, aren't you? Happy Friday, says Richard. Happy Friday to you too. Why would the Foreign Office override the whole vetting procedure and then not tell the Prime Minister? It's not as if Starmer was desperate to appoint Mandelson. He didn't even like him. It's almost as if someone else was telling him what to do. Well, it's a very interesting observation. I don't understand the obsession with it having to be Mandelson at any cost, at any price. Love a bit of Alex Phillips down under in New Zealand. Never been there, but, you know, hopefully I'm there on your airwaves, it seems. But when are you going to do your Fabian Society expose update, says Dave in Tauranga in New Zealand? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't mind every now and then crafting an invisible silver foil hat, sticking it on, and then going, who is this funny cabal, the shadowy network that insisted that Mandelson had to have that position? Oh, taking it off again. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Alex and Emma, I think it's telling that Trump communicated reservations about Mandelson in a November 2024 phone call. But accounts of the conversation in Florida and subsequent calls suggest Starmer received repeated US representations against his pick for envoy. What did US security know? Even if he didn't know anything, the parliamentary rules state very clearly the record must be updated in Parliament at the earliest opportunity, as Emma had said. So if he only found out on, say, Tuesday, then where was he on Wednesday? I'll give you a clue. He was boring the nation to death, refusing to answer a question, says Liam in Worcester. You know, Ems, they're trying to actually prorogue Parliament early. Do you remember that, the old proroguing of Parliament? Where
those were the days.
Started throwing that word around like we'd always had it in our vocabulary. But it's happening again. Prorogue is back in fashion, ladies and gents, because the Labour Party are trying to prorogue Parliament early ahead of the King's speech on the 17th of May. Why? Well, there wouldn't have to be another PMQs. They're just so dodgy. I think we can safely say Starmer lied, or at best manipulated the truth. But what I want to know is why? Why was he so desperate to have Mandelson in that position? Why take that risk? That's what everyone wants to know. Does anyone know what part of the vetting procedure Mandelson failed on? I do wonder how much more serious it could get, says Steve from Colchester. We will never know what he failed on because it's a deep dive, very intricate, very personal. Frankly, I don't think I want to know. It might give me nightmares. But the big question is why? It was a crazy appointment. When he first said, oh, guess who's going to be American ambassador? It's Peter Mandelson. Everyone was like, eh?
It's an interesting point, isn't it, about Trump? Because it's also a weird choice of appointment, given that Mandelson probably was never going to go down that well with the current American regime.
I think quite a few people for a while liked him. This is all my bones are telling me, not that bones are facts, but my bones still, they tell me things. And they're telling me that this is somehow connected to Diego Garcia. It's somehow connected to the cabal of lawyers that has for a long time run the Labour Party. It's, you know, it's basically, in all political parties, there are an elite group who operate behind the scenes. You might not even know their names. They're not necessarily the people who hold elected office. They might not even have a visible role in number 10 or in a particular department, but they're there, whether it might be a donor, whether it might be a sort of spin doctor, a Svengali somewhere in the corridors
like a
of
Peter
power.
Mandelson.
Like a Peter, exactly. Yeah, actually.
It's like a babushka doll of Peter Mandelson.
The many
what a horrible thought.
Layer upon layer of whole wheat Mandelson. Nobody wants that for their breakfast. Right, we're going to take a short break, but don't you go anywhere because, well, we're going to have some fun with this. There's so much more to discuss just after the break.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello. Oh, the things we talk about. Right. So many times in the United Kingdom, you come across a story and the story just poses more questions than it does answers, which is apparently criminal migrants, asylum seekers who commit crimes, will lose their rights to benefits.
I knew exactly where you were going with this before you started speaking, Alex.
Why are we doing it anyway? It's mad.
Exactly what I thought.
It's mental.
Exactly what I thought.
So apparently this is, they will lose their benefits and free accommodation. So what are you deporting them? Because apparently you're not very good at that. So where do they go?
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not agreeing that any of these are grim asylum seekers who are on the rob and on the grope should be living in hotels and, pocket money allowances, all the benefits that, they get given since they're beatified the minute they land on our shores. But it's all very well saying that, but people say, well, it's unacceptable. We're now going to make sure that they can't do this and they won't get this stuff. Well, what are you going to do with them? Because you don't deport people.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that you can be an asylum seeker, break the law, and continue to receive all of the taxpayer money, continue to live in your nice taxpayer-funded accommodation. And also in this news report that apparently there's no sort of discretion when it comes to whether or not those who can fund their own accommodation, they have the means to do so, receive taxpayer funding anyway. So we're putting people up who are perfectly capable of funding their own accommodation. Personally, in my view, and I imagine probably you'll agree with me, Alex, that I don't care if the crime committed by an asylum seeker is the tiniest crime, even if it's something they've shoplifted something tiny. I don't care. Deport them.
You come into the country illegally. Crime's already committed, as far as I'm concerned. The minute you get in a boat and you're giving money, lining the pockets of people traffickers and criminal cartels and terrorist organisations, you have already committed the crime.
Anyone who comes here illegally should be immediately deported.
What did you make of this story? It's not on my little list here, but about, I mean, look, this is obvious, isn't it? The lawyers who apparently scripting people, particularly from sort of Pakistan, Bangladesh, places like that, scripting them with how to make it seem like you're gay. So, well, go along to, go to Heaven nightclub, get a little selfie at a Pride event, maybe find some sort of enthusiastic young gay man and have a photo taken with him, and that's how you prove to everybody you're LGBTQ+. No, you're not. Because what I don't understand about this, first of all, if we are letting people in on the basis of their sexuality, about 2/3 to 3/4 of the world restrict the lives of homosexuals in some way. So it's basically everyone from, non-Western Europe, you can come and live here. Also, someone who's worked in Pakistan, I think they're weirdly more open-minded about some of this stuff than elements of Western European culture. But for a long time I've said, how is it that these people come over on the boats and the minute they land, they don't have money to pay lawyers, they don't have the connections, but they've all got their scripts, they all know to throw away their passports, they all know what sort of, claim to make, and then they have 3-4 rolls of the dice. It's about time the lawyers themselves are investigated.
Yeah. Well, now we know we already knew it was an entire industry, and there are lots of different aspects to this industry, but these lawyers are obviously making a lot of money from this, charging thousands to give this advice to these asylum seekers. Where that money comes from, by the way, particularly if they've come across the channel illegally anyway and have paid thousands to smugglers to be put in one of these small boats to cross, and now suddenly they have thousands of pounds to pay these lawyers. Where's that money coming from? I'm guessing is it taxpayer money? Is it NGOs? Exactly.
Well, a lot of NGOs are then taking taxpayers' money.
We need to
be looking. Stupid system.
We need to be looking into who this is being funded by, where that money is coming from, is it coming from the taxpayer, and any lawyer who is giving information to these migrants in order to help them game the system should be prosecuted. Yeah. And if that lawyer is from another country and is not a British national, they should be deported.
I don't even understand how people can come and operate here as anything in a public service role, public facing role, when they're not a British national, frankly. I like to call it the illegal immigration industrial complex, because it's all there, from the international criminal cartels connected to the terror organisations, with the NGOs, with the lawyers, with then the people who are giving up their hotels for use, many of which
possibly state-backed as well by foreign hostile states.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And not many, but I do think it's a sort of over-representation of the hoteliers who do say, yeah, come and use my hotel as an asylum hotel. They tend not to appear to be British nationals either.
Yep. Serco, name and shame.
Oh, name and shame. But there is an entire illegal immigration industrial complex riddled with criminality, and like you said, with the long arms of hostile states and terror organisations. And the taxpayers are funding every single side of this. We're sort of indirectly paying the NGOs, who then pay these lawyers, who then aid and abet the people who've come into the country legally, and then when they want to challenge their deportation ruling, we're both paying for the government, then we're paying for them as well. I mean, it's just it's a bottomless black hole of our money in order to infiltrate our country with a load of who knows what from where.
Yeah, we're being forced to fund our own demise. Everybody's drowning in taxes. Everyone is struggling. And we're putting people who come up here illegally up to great expense. I mean, it is just unjust, isn't it? It's unfair. It's unfair that the British public are being bled dry in order to fund people who have been brought here through these criminal gangs. It's obviously mixed up in this entire sort of industry, this entire economy of criminality. We know that the people are coming here and then working illegally for, companies like Deliveroo, Uber Eats. That was in the news not too long ago. People are coming here, working illegally. It's all tied together in these vast criminal networks that stretch across Europe and over to North Africa, the Middle East. And the British people are being asked to fund this. It's wrong.
It's very wrong.
And how anybody can try to make a moral halo polishing argument for it is just beyond me.
I've been enjoying reading the Old Testament lately, and you suddenly see the sort of darker side of Christianity, and I'm like, all right.
She's full of God's wrath.
Yeah. A lot of people get smote in Joshua, which is my new favourite word.
Would you like to see some people get smote, Alex?
I think it's smoting time. No,
smiting.
Yeah, we're not going to smote anybody. But we are going to smote the show temporarily and go to an advert break, but don't go anywhere, because on the other side we're going to be joined by the excellent Colonel Simon Diggins, former British Army Colonel, former UK Defence Attaché. He might know a thing or two about vetting. He also might be able to point us in the direction of what is going on with defence spending as well. That's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Sorry about that, we're just having a chinwag, weren't we, Ems? OK, kidnapping Emma. Not, chaining her to a radiator kidnapping, but we've encouraged her to stay another half an hour, which is always lovely. So, Emma, you can sort of join me in cross-examining, well, just asking friendly, gentle questions to Colonel Simon Diggins, former British Army Colonel and former UK Defence Attaché in Kabul. Great to have you aboard, Simon. First of all, let us start with the big story of today, which is Mandelson, the vetting. Apparently he didn't pass. Apparently Starmer wasn't told. Apparently nobody was told, which to me it seems stretching the truth from where I'm standing. But what about from where you're standing? Do you think any of these arguments of the dog ate my homework are remotely plausible?
Alex, good morning to you, and Emma, good morning to you as well. As you say, I think we're into weapons of mass destruction territory, aren't we? In some respects, back from the bad old days. I think what I would offer is that the vetting process is a closed process. You have to go through this on a regular basis. If you're as a career army officer, particularly the more senior you get, and you're regularly checked, and you're basically just told you passed or you haven't passed. So I think what seems to have happened is Mandelson didn't pass his vetting, but somebody then decided not to tell somebody what was going on. I find that extraordinary. I think that's a real failure. The thing is that government often works by sort of nudges, hints and whispers. And the fact that Number 10 had basically picked Mandelson and said he's going to be our ambassador to Washington. And then there's this kind of parallel process running on security vetting. And then, whoops, he doesn't pass it. and then somebody doesn't think, and do you know what, we ought to warn number 10, or maybe they did warn number 10, and then we get into the whole sort of territory, sort of conspiracy.com territory, of whether or not members of Starmer's staff had been briefed, and they chose to keep it from him or not, and he was briefed. So we're in this odd territory. I find it bizarre that they wouldn't say he hadn't passed. I find it bizarre that somebody who was the head of the Foreign Office would actually say to him, look, we don't care, he's going to go and do that. My experience of it is again, it's because it's a closed system, is you don't really hear where somebody hasn't passed or has passed. Sometimes you occasionally hear that people are restricted in what they have access to, and you can imply or infer that something may have gone wrong with it when they're vetting.
But this is it. It's not supposed to be a totally inconsequential process, is it? You know, you're having the highest diplomatic role in the country, in the world, with our closest ally at a time when it's an extremely sensitive moment in geopolitics, at a time when the Jeffrey Epstein scandal is full throttled. And so the vetting shouldn't be inconsequential, and it certainly shouldn't be a case that it's not even spoken about. You know, if he didn't pass, he didn't pass. Someone somewhere said something to someone. Otherwise, what is the whole point in the exercise? Too much doesn't add up here, it must be said. And then let's talk about this, because, I mean, one thing that doesn't add up is our defence budget. Successive governments, I think it's fair to say, have failed miserably. But what we're hearing now, and it's only allegations, we don't know if it's true, but unfortunately it has the ring of sad truth about it, which is that Rachel Reeves has been accused of resisting pleas to pour billions extra into the armed forces because she said, why should they get more money when they've got such a poor record on gender equality? I'm sorry, call me old-fashioned, but when I think of, you know, scary soldiers and fighter pilots and all the rest of it, I tend to imagine the vast majority are likely to be men, because men are physically far stronger than women, tend to be a little less emotional as well. And I know that might sound rather Victorian, but I think of those things as biological facts, not saying women can't do those roles. But the idea that this spiteful little point of extremist left-wing politics might be the reason why, in part, that money is yet to be forthcoming to defence is, well, it's just, if true, it's a sad indictment of the very nature of this government.
Yeah, I mean, there are allegations. It does sound completely absurd on the surface, but we do understand some of their obsessions and some of the way in which they look at it. When you look at what's happened with Bridget Phillipson and her failure to implement what is a legal ruling in terms of the issue around trans, so there is a sort of progressive ideology which sits at the heart of it. And I think the reality is that in terms of defence, this is not a government that's effectively simpatico towards defence. I think John Healey personally is a decent human being, but he's probably not somebody who's potential leader, and certainly doesn't necessarily represent the kind of sort of North London, Islington progressive ideology that people like Starmer, Corbyn, remember that Starmer worked quite happily for Corbyn, actually represent. And for them, gender equality and issues like that whole progressive agenda are probably more important than the defence of the realm. And I think that's the challenge we've got. I mean, Rachel has really only she's got three choices, basically. The first one is increased taxes. The second one is to sort of cut up the current cake in a different way. And the third one is probably to be innovative in terms of things like a defence bond and everything. But she's done nothing. You know, we've had serious reviews by serious people, Lord Robertson, General Sir Richard Barrons, Dr. Fiona Hill, looking at our defence, looking at the requirements, and where we are now. I mean, the most recent news in the Ministry of Defence is actually looking, and this sounds absolutely bizarre, we're looking at a £3.5 billion cut in defence this year, simply because at the moment, under the current sort of financial disposition, we can't make the figures add up. I mean, that does not seem to me to be a government that's serious about dealing with the multiple threats that Lord George Robertson was so articulate about earlier on this week.
Not only that, is we've learned that taxpayers' money, which seems to be in very short supply, is being used to punish SAS veterans. That's according to former army commanders. After a judge has dismissed the legal challenge brought by a family of an RAF man killed 35 years ago. Well, let us not forget a particular lawyer who was very keen on picking up those cases, whose barristers' chambers that he was part of, in many respects, led the way in the prosecution of former veterans in Northern Ireland. How on earth can anybody function in the theatre of war if they think that any single act that they perpetrate could end up being prosecuted in a court of law.
Yeah, I think this is the challenge that the government has got. I mean, nobody serious in the defence believes that we are above the law. We're not. I mean, we're subject to multiple laws. We have our own military acts, the Army Act, Navy Act, Air Force Act. I think it's now called the Armed Services Act, but basically our own military discipline. We're always subject to UK civil law, and we're often subject also to the law of the country we're in. So we are continuously operating under that, and we also, if we're on operations, operate under international humanitarian law. So we are not an armed force out of control and does what it's like. So we constantly, and nobody will defend illegal, immoral acts by armed forces personnel. But when you've done something completely legitimate, investigated, checked and reviewed, and you've been told you're fine, and then fined 20, 30, 40, even 50 years later, in some cases, that's now been challenged by a different interpretation of the law, particularly things linked to ECHR, which is a principle-based set of law rather than a specific offences, then that is completely wrong. And as you rightly point out, most of these cases are being brought under legal aid. In other words, we, the taxpayer, are paying for the prosecution of our own soldiers. I mean, absolute nonsense. I can't believe it. And as you say, I mean, I'm embarrassed to kind of stand up sometimes and talk to people, particularly to young soldiers, and say, come on and join them, because they must look over their shoulder and thinking, well, if it all goes horribly wrong, what's going to happen to me down the line? I mean, the thing is a complete nonsense. No, it's not just complete nonsense. I think it's harmful, and I think it's disgusting. Simon, thank you ever so much, as always, for your expertise. Emma, what do you make of, all of this and any of it? I mean, we don't know if the gender parity thing is the reason why extra money hasn't been given to the defence budget. It doesn't sound too out of character. This is the woman, of course, who demanded every single picture of a man was removed from the Cabinet Office. It's a bit mad. Seems like a misandrist to me, not a feminist.
Pretty unhinged.
But, it turns out that, Cabinet Ministers saying they must back welfare cuts to fund defence. But we know that bill came in front of Parliament and the backbenchers don't want it. Everything that the Labour Party need to do, well, they're going to be unable to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing that also now with the refusal of Bridget Phillipson to give that guidance on same-sex spaces, despite the fact it's been an entire year since the Supreme Court ruling that, insisted that, women do have a right to their own, same-sex spaces, bathrooms, changing rooms, etc. And they've been dragging their feet all this time. Why is it? Probably because they're worried about some kind of backbench rebellion, that they've got so many people in their party who just buy into all of the gender ideology stuff. Same thing with defence. They would honestly rather put the British public in danger, or in the case of the same-sex spaces, women in danger, in order to push their ideology. Same thing with the net zero stuff. What's the reason why we don't have energy security? Well, we won't drill in the North Sea.
I know, it's balmy. It's actually balmy.
It's all ideology, and it's a monumental act of self-harm. And I just think it's crazy that you would even want gender parity in the army. What you want is the strongest, best fighters, the most sort of cutting-edge military. And as you said, Alex, the reality is that men are stronger than women. I would much rather there be more men in the army than seeing I don't need to see myself represented and my sex represented in the army. That's absurd. It means absolutely nothing to me.
Exactly.
I want our country to be properly defended.
I want to be safe. And this is coming from somebody who's in the process of applying to be an RAF reservist and currently undergoing her advanced security vetting. So I know, I'm going through this myself, I know there's definitely a whiff of something funny about, well, who knew that he didn't pass it? I mean, come on.
You might be helping to get some of that defence funding, and you'll be topping up the numbers.
Exactly. It'll be me. Me and me alone by the time we lose Akrotiri and Diego Garcia. It's just going to be me at Fairford.
In a gun turret.
Yeah.
Firing out.
The last one. Let's speak to Barry in Norwich. Good morning, Barry.
Hello, good morning, Alex. Good morning, Emma. I'm in Cromer, actually, not Norwich.
Oh, well, it's all sort of very eastern seacoast.
Yeah, took a little trip to the coast. Why not?
Beautiful.
Yeah, I just like to make a comment on Keir Starmer, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he needs to take a trip to the King, doesn't he, really? Yeah.
He needs to take a trip to the King. I don't know. What's this trip going to result in? Is it going to be sort of reverse Charles I? Is he going to be smoked?
Well, no, he can't resign himself. He can't revere himself to himself, can he? So he has to revere himself to the King to resign. I think he should go. Yeah.
Well, I can't see Starmer taking himself to the king and saying, "Dear King, please can you get rid of me?" I can't see it happening. Of course, it is the King's speech coming up, and the King is about to do his sort of big, shiny state visit to America to try and heal relations there. But look, I think I agree he's got to go, but the process by which the Labour Party would be able to get rid of him is all the backbenchers would have to back it. Then there has to be a bit like the Conservative leadership election. I think that post-May, there will probably be good reason for that process to be kick-started. Although I say this to you, and I say this probably in chorus of many other people, I don't like Starmer, and I especially do not like the cartel of lawyers around him who seem to be pulling the strings. But what else replaces him, Emma?
That's what worries me, is I think that the risk is that we just look at the people who are waiting in the wings. What if we get Prime Minister Ed Miliband or Angela Rayner, who's much
I won't allow her.
I mean, the chances of us getting Wes Streeting, I don't know. He's more on the kind of New Labour side of the party, but he's been tainted by Mandelson as well now. Yeah. So, whoever is waiting in the wings is going to be as bad, if not worse, than Keir Starmer.
If the sort of cabal, who I believe are running the country secretly, it's got to be one of their pick. It's got to be one of their own. And that's, that isn't anyone whose name particularly has been brought to the fore yet, as far as I know. Oh, God, imagine it being Sadiq Khan.
I don't think that's possible, is it?
I don't know.
I mean, if they make him...
anything's possible with this government. They could do anything. Well, they are making him a lord. Yeah. That's the point. That's coming.
I don't like to imagine that is the play that they're going for here. They make him a lord and then they make him Prime Minister. Can you imagine?
Yes, that's what's so scary.
But this is the thing. I mean, how Keir Starmer's managed to hold on this long, I don't know. But if it is the case that the writing is now on the wall, that you look at, the way that this is snowballing and how completely indefensible this is, that the chances of him going within the next couple of months probably pretty high. We're going to end up in a much worse situation, and probably for
I don't know.
Until the next general election.
I kind of feel like not having a government for a while will be a bit of a reprieve. I think it'll be nice. Let's speak now to Laura Jane in Hampshire. Good morning, Laura Jane.
Good morning, Alex. You better both put your tin hats on. The one that's conspiracy theory hat.
Okay.
I don't understand why the media... well, I do understand. You have to discuss these things. But to me, it's absolutely pointless discussing it, because Mandelson knows everything there is to know about anybody in any of those departments. And he wanted to be the ambassador, and he got it because he knows too much. And now they're having to find ways round, why did we appoint him, and using all the lawyers to help them. But to me, it's simple. And I know this sounds very simplistic, Alex. He wanted the job, and he got it because he knows too much about too many people.
It doesn't sound simple. I wrote a Substack on this just after the appointment, and I went through all the reasons, and that was one of my perfectly valid reasons for how he got into that position. He's part of the cabal. They're all in it together. It's a circular firing squad. That is the way it tends to work in politics, so I don't think that's tinfoil hat at all, Laura Jane. I mean... This is exactly what I'm saying. There is, if you look back historically, of for the last two Labour governments, it has been two barristers' chambers connected, the Doughty chambers, the Matrix chambers, whether it's the sort of creating a peerage for Richard Hermer so he can become the Attorney General. The very first time, not very first time, but I think it hadn't happened. It's only happened once before, that's over 100 years ago, that the Attorney General wasn't elected, but appointed. It all goes back to, again, Matrix Chambers and Cherie Blair, Tony Blair. What Phillips Sands, the Chagos Islands. Someone sent a message in here which I thought was quite interesting. I flagged it to read. So many things here. Where was it? It was very well thought about. Basically saying, I can't find the exact message now, but I had flagged it up. Basically saying how interesting that David Lammy has been the sort of connecting dot a lot in all of this. He was the Foreign Secretary at the time of the appointment. He really wanted Mandelson in the role. He was also a big part of wanting the Chagos Islands given back, reparations and all that. And apparently he didn't know anything either. It's funny that we are learning that Yvette Cooper doesn't know, that Sir Keir Starmer doesn't know. But yeah, what about Lammy?
I think it's a pretty widespread view, at least anecdotally, that people are wondering what dirt does Mandelson have on the people who are in a position to help him get appointed, because this is a man who almost certainly has a lot of dirt on a lot of people. And I think that the British public are wondering. It does sort of look a bit like our democracy is unravelling in general. And you look at what happened in Gorton and Denton and all of these questions about family voting, and even though the kind of report came back and said, well, you know, there's not sufficient evidence of family voting, I think, you know, there are still question marks there. It was observed that people were going into those booths together, and you have all of this sort of like sectarian campaigning as well. It's starting to look as if I don't know if the word that you can use is corruption. Sleaze doesn't seem like it's doesn't go far enough. But there's a kind of cronyism. It seems as if our democracy used to be held up by this sense of, you know, ethics, of virtues, of people who were in it for public service. And now it looks as if all of that has eroded. And the British public see what's going on and think, well, I don't trust these people. They're lying to me, and I don't really know what's going on. And in a democracy, you need that transparency.
Well, you do. Interesting as well, it's The Guardian who really broke this latest chapter in the Mandelson scandal. And someone's also saying, so Jordan in Chesterfield is the one who pointed out the Lamy connection, so well done there. Someone else has said, so why do you think it is The Guardian is sort of wanting to push this front and centre ahead of local elections at a very critical time for the Labour Party? The Labour Party not being left-wing enough, they want to push them into the abyss so blimmin' the crazy Greens can take over?
I don't know. I mean, the rationale seems pretty obvious to me, that if the Labour Party do really, really badly in the May elections, Keir Starmer is definitely gone. That is the final... I mean, we keep saying this has got to be the final nail in the coffin, but if they do very badly in the May elections, then he has to go. And obviously they're going to be wanting someone who's much further to the left of the party, probably Angela Rayner.
Now, in terms of due diligence, got to do it here, which is a government comment. The security vetting process for Peter Mandelson was sponsored by the FCDO. The decision to grant developed vetting to Peter Mandelson against the recommendation of UK security vetting was taken by officials in the FCDO. Neither the Prime Minister nor any government minister was aware that Peter Mandelson was granted developed vetting against the advice of UK security vetting until earlier this week. Once the Prime Minister was informed, he immediately instructed officials to establish the facts about why the developed vetting was granted in order to enact plans to update the House of Commons. The government is committed to complying with the humble address in full as soon as possible. Any documentation within the scope of the humble address that requires redaction on the basis of national security or international relations will be provided to the ISC. That's the Intelligence and Security Committee, which is a cross-party committee in Parliament. This will include documents provided to the FCDO by UK security vetting. I tell you what's missing from this, by the way, if you want to look for the loophole. It's basically saying that they weren't told that the developed vetting was happening. It doesn't say that we weren't told that he failed the first round of vetting. That seems the glaring omission, as far as I can tell. Right, we've got to go to a break. Don't go anywhere.
world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, stuff is funny. So I was just saying, wasn't I, that the government spokesman has failed to say in this official statement that they weren't told that Mandelson had failed, just that he'd gone on to the developed vetting. But apparently, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, wait for this, has said he's furious and it was unforgivable that neither he nor any minister was told Lord Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting. And he will set out the relevant facts in Parliament on Monday. Let's speak now to Paul Scully, former Conservative Government Minister. Hi, Paul. We had you on to talk about other things, but come on, this is way too juicy. We've got to sink our teeth into this one. So now, this government statement appears to suggest that they weren't told that he was granted developed vetting, but this written statement doesn't say anything about we weren't told that he had failed the vetting. Well, now Starmer has said that he's furious and it was unforgivable that he or any minister was not told that he had failed security vetting. Well, who was? What's gone on here?
Alex, I'm such a nerd. I started Googling Starmer furious earlier today because every time he's found out, he's always furious. It's always someone else's fault. What was interesting as well, just earlier, about half an hour, I was reading ago that Dave Maddox in The Independent actually reported the allegation that Mandelson had failed his vetting last September. So this is not something that has happened, just popped up when David Lammy said, I didn't know about it until yesterday. Huh. This is possibly the least curious Prime Minister that I think we've ever had on history. Why does he never ask anybody any questions? He just seems to get furious at the end of it. He's got to go.
He's got to go. There's too much weird going on here. Missing phones, deleted messages, I'm not told. Ollie Robbins being fired. The man wasn't even in position when the appointment of Mandelson was made. Exactly. Nothing is adding up about this. Nothing. And I think,
wasn't it Ollie Robbins as well was about the only person that said, are you sure you want Peter Mandelson in the job? I think he was the only one that questioned it in the first place, and he's the one that's been thrown under the bus. So
him and many others. There's a lot of human roadkill at the moment emanating from that Labour Party. Let's speak about what we did bring you on to speak about very briefly. Compensation for major state scandals could reach almost £15 billion, according to a watchdog. And many victims face lengthy waits for financial redress, according to a new report from the National Audit Office. You were, of course, former Post Office Minister. I mean, that is exactly the sort of thing we're looking at here. Things like the Horizon scandal, before that, the infected blood scandal. Why do these things take so long?
They are complicated, to be fair. There's a lot of work that you have to do, especially with the Horizon scandal, for example. There were people affected in different ways. Some people had a straight financial loss. Other people, it was how they were, what happened to their businesses over a period of time, what happened to their standing in the community, their health and their marriages and these kind of things. And often people commit suicide. So there is work to be done, but it just takes forever, which was always the risk with this. The one regret I have, I was really proud, it was the best thing I did in politics, to announce the inquiry, to start the conversations. The one thing I would do differently is I'd have handled it in-house rather than out of the post office to mark their own work.
This is my, but very quickly, why is it the UK taxpayer? Why am I paying for this? I didn't do it.
No, but at the end of you're right. And actually, funny enough, I had to go through a value for money exercise because the Treasury were underwriting this. But at the end of the day, it was a government-owned state organisation that
what about Fujitsu?
Suicide and threw them in a prison. It should never have happened in the first place, but now it has.
Seems to be Fujitsu, who are still getting government contracts, should possibly stick their hands in their pockets.
Yeah, and they have. They promised they would when I was still there. They absolutely need to do that. But at the end of the day, is Treasury is still going to underwrite it to make sure it happens, and then we've got to go after Fujitsu and others.
Paul, thank you ever so much. Paul Scully there, former Conservative Government Minister and Post Office Minister. Thank you ever so much to Emma. I would come back to you for your final thoughts, but afraid the clock is against us, as it might be for Sir Keir Starmer as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right. How are you? Probably a bit better than Sir Keir Starmer. I wonder if he does lose sleep at night, or whether he's just, because he looks like someone who doesn't really, is impervious to everything. Certainly impervious to decency and morality, it would seem. Andy from Thatcham says, Alex, this entire government are a national security liability. We must have a general election immediately to ensure things don't get worse. I find myself agreeing with that. I often say, when you look at what's going on in Iran, and they all go, you've got to open the Strait of Hormuz, you mustn't bomb civilian infrastructure, don't bomb the oil fields, la, 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 la. I'm like, can someone rein in Ed Miliband? He's basically doing that to our own North Sea oil and gas infrastructure. It's a crime of domestic sabotage. Anyway, it just, the list is endless, isn't it, when it comes to this government and all of the ills being committed by them. But astonishing now. Starmer, he's played a big card, hasn't he? He's just played a very big card because he has turned around and said he is furious about what happened. And he said that him nor any other government minister was informed that Mandelson had failed the vetting. Now, that's very different, right, to the verbatim script from a government spokesperson, which is being cleverly worked out legalistically, because this is what lawyers and barristers and the likes are very good at doing, sitting down and thinking, if we use this exact combination of words, the full stop must go there, the comma must go there, we don't say that, we use this instead, and legalistically we're home and dry. even though it might be that, you know, they definitely did commit the murder. Well, that's just circumstantial evidence. Where is the burden of proof? Now, it's interesting looking at this. The first paragraph just lays out facts. Security vetting process was sponsored by the FCDO. Well, obviously. Decision to grant developed vetting to Mandelson against the recommendation of UK vetting was taken by officials in the FCDO. Right, OK. Neither the Prime Minister nor any government minister was aware that Peter Mandelson was granted developed vetting against the advice of the UK security vetting until earlier this week. Well, that doesn't say in the written statement that neither Prime Minister nor any government minister was aware that Peter Mandelson failed the vetting. That bit, which is the main thing to say, we don't know that he failed that vetting. This statement doesn't say that in anywhere, verbatim. And yet it seems to be that's the music coming out of the Starmer mouth right now, which is a pretty audacious card to play, if it ain't true. Let's speak to Ben Habib, leader of Advance UK. Ben, great to have you on the show. Boris Johnson, essentially, got dethroned, I would argue, for much less.
He did, I think, for eating cake and having a glass of orange juice, was it? Or did he have champagne? I can't remember. But either way, it was a much lesser crime than lying repeatedly to Parliament. Starmer, when he was first faced with Mandelson's connections to Epstein, said that Mandelson had lied to him. You might remember that. That was his first defense. Mandelson lied to me. I thought everything was clear. We had stuck to due process. He had been vetted, he said. He said that in Parliament. And no sooner had he said that, we discovered that actually senior members of the Cabinet Office, including seasoned individuals like Jonathan Powell, had advised the Prime Minister at the time of the appointment of Mandelson that you do so taking serious personal reputational risk. We knew that last year. Starmer lied through his teeth the minute it became clear that Mandelson's appointment was a disaster. And then he made McSweeney fall on his sword. And no sooner had McSweeney fallen on his sword that McSweeney's phone apparently was stolen so that no one could check the text messages between
not just
himself.
that, when he reported it, he happened to report it as going missing on a street the other side of London, which happened to have a very similar name to the street he was actually on. And then this happened to only have come to light when the CCTV has probably been wiped. I mean, it's, you know, if this is all circumstantial evidence, there's a whole lot of interesting coincidence taking place.
Absolutely. So, you know, the whole McSweeney thing was a distraction. And now we discovered that actually after Mandelson's appointment was announced, but before he was put in post, the UK Security Vetting Office, which I think is part of the Cabinet Office, had informed, so part of the Cabinet Office, which is worth noting, had informed the Foreign Office that he was not suitable for the role, that he should not be given it. And they overrode it. Now, it is inconceivable, I think, to any sane-minded individual that in receipt of a report saying that Mandelson should not get the post, that the Foreign Office would not have told the Prime Minister.
Right. I agree.
It is inconceivable.
I think it's inconceivable. But what I don't understand, because I think the next layer to the questions is the critical. This is going to be the rich seam, the thread that unravels the entire tapestry of scandal, in my opinion, which is why? It was clear before any of this came to light that Mandelson was a shocking choice, a controversial choice at best, because he already had against his name various scandals, various besmirchments and black marks. He was already tainted goods when he was given that extremely important office of state. So why? Why risk it? Why did it have to be him at any price?
Yeah.
Why?
So, I mean, that is a really, really good question. And I just, if I may, just quickly go through Mandelson's history. Very soon after Blair was elected in 97, Mandelson had to resign as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, I think he was then, because he'd taken a loan that he hadn't registered on his parliamentary interests. Then 3 years later, he had to resign from the cabinet again when he was Secretary of State. Sorry, I've got it wrong way around. He was Secretary of State of Trade and Industry, and then he had to resign as Secretary of State of Northern Ireland because he tried to get someone a British passport faster than they were entitled to get a British passport. He left government. He then was anointed commissioner to the European Commission, you know, a completely cushy job, a man who's already had to step down twice from the cabinet because of indiscretions. He was then ennobled given further promotion in our system. And then, after everything, everyone on the street, you, I, everyone who's remotely engaged with politics knew this guy's a bad guy. And then he was made ambassador. So this is a chap who we know repeatedly to have done bad things, if I can put it that way.
And gets promoted every time.
And gets promoted every time.
Why?
Why? That means he's got information on other people in the Labour Party, in office. They are all in it together. And what it reveals, I think, is this sort of swamp of disgusting chamocracy, corruption, promotion, indulgence of their own back pockets at the expense of the office they hold. You know, these people
So then
foul.
the next question is who? We're talking about the chamocracy. We're talking about, well, I always call it the cabal of corrupt lawyers. But I want to know who. Who is this? Is Starmer their puppet? Is it Starmer? Who are the people that Mandelson is so heavily connected to? Let's not forget that not that long ago he was caught urinating in a public wall in the borough of Kensington in London because he'd been for a lovely little supper with George Osborne, a man who also seems to have had in his time as Chancellor good relationships. The golden age of China, we were told. It's funny that golden age seems to be coming back, doesn't it? Mega embassies, you know, you go give your mates the Chagos Islands, they go over there, they sign big deals, don't they, for solar panels and wind farms and only get about 500 quid in return. Again, there's this sort of, there's a weird China thing going on. I'm trying to put all the mosaics together.
And a Russian thing. Do you remember Mandelson and George Osborne were photographed together on Derry Praska's boat? I'm going back a long way in time now, maybe 15, 20 years. But these people are... And why is Osborne, ostensibly a Conservative, hobnobbing with Mandelson? They should be political rivals.
Why are they mates? Why are they hanging out?
Why are they mates? The whole thing is rotten. The whole thing is rotten. They're all scratching each other's backs and making sure that no one is called to account. And Mandelson, therefore, was promoted into the ambassadorial position. Everyone thought they could get away with it. It's, you know, it's money for old rope for mates. And actually, this time, he hasn't got away with it. And the Prime Minister is squarely to blame. And if he knew nothing about all of this all the way through, when the average man on the street knew everything that was required to be known, then the Prime Minister is seriously incompetent. And he should resign for incompetence, if not for lying. But the truth is, he's a liar.
Oh, the truth is he's one of those people. Like, one thing I really hate in life is when people say, well, I didn't tell a lie, when they just didn't tell you the facts.
Oh, true. Yeah.
When withholding information is a form of lying. It is curating reality in order to give a completely different picture. And this is, of course, how lawyers behave. You know, when you see these televised trials and all the rest of it, they'll say, well, you know, we deem this evidence inadmissible because of this particular technical detail. So then they're sort of, right, you've got to strike that off. That can't be taken into consideration. Then they say, well, of course, there's no smoking gun here. It's all circumstantial. And the way that this whole process has played out over a period of months, you can see the cogs of the sort of, you know, courtroom cabal all turning, thinking, how do we get out of this on technicalities? When do we have to do things by the law? They're in their bunker right now. Well, they're not, because apparently Starmer's over there hanging out with Mini Napoleon, discussing how to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Great. That's going to sort out all the world's issues. We're going to be taking a live feed from that shortly, ladies and gentlemen, because they're about to, I don't know, hobble along in front of somewhere in Paris and try and look like nothing's, you know, on fire in their own countries. But there is still something here, Ben. There is something. I'm desperate to know what it is. I can see, you know, it's a bit like, you know, writing a quadratic equation. So I've got all these characters on one side here, and I've got other characters on one side here, and you've got Epstein coming off here, and you've got the Blair government, you've got barristers' chambers, you've got people appointed without election to high offices of state, who are from barristers' chambers. It's all the so-called human rights lawyers in this together, and there's something here. There's something bigger. What is it?
I mean, there could be a conspiracy behind all of it. You know, every time a conspiracy has been put forward in the past, it's been rubbished and then often found out to be the case, to be the truth. But even if there isn't a conspiracy here, it's so rotten we all know it's rotten. These people need to be removed from public office and never to be allowed back in again. We need a complete sweep of Parliament. We need new people in Parliament. We need people who are in Parliament because they love this country and because they want to do good by this country, not because they're there as career politicians up the greasy pole for their £96,000 a year, plus expenses, plus all the freebies they can get during the jobs, plus ennoblements, knighthoods, cushy numbers in ambassadorial roles, and so on and so forth. We've got to get people into Parliament who actually want to be in Parliament for the country, not for themselves. That's where we've fundamentally gone wrong. Competent people who know what they're doing and they're doing it for the right reason. That's where we've so gone wrong. But you made a really interesting point about tick box approach by lawyers. You know, that is a European Union approach to existence.
Yeah.
The British way would have been, have you, in the round, having made your case, whether you've withheld the truth or told lies, have you misled the British people?
Yeah.
And under our common law system, the Prime Minister would be found guilty.
I think so.
But under the European Union approach. Yeah.
Oh, well, no, this is true. The sort of Gallic interpretation, the buff interpretation of the law. It's a bit like, well, you know, it didn't actually technically tell a lie. Where's Mandelson?
Does
anyone know where he is?
He's not in prison, is he? I think he was bailed, wasn't he?
No, he's not in prison, he's bailed. But every time it's sort of legally written in the newspapers, it's always written as of no fixed abode. Apparently his house in Wiltshire is up for sale and he's no longer there. Can you imagine? This is a man. So I'll tell you what else is really funny, because I was saying to American friends the other day, subpoena for all of the documents surrounding the Chagos deal. Subpoena for that information. Subpoena for what's... You cannot technically right now subpoena Mandelson because apparently he's of no fixed abode, which is all very convenient, isn't it? Amazing that this man with so many great connections now finds himself homeless without an legal address to send a legal letter to. But also he's no longer a lord, so you can't even get him at that office address. Everything's just so convenient. Phones get stolen, messages are wiped, people can't be subpoenaed, they've got AWOL, who knows? Oh, well, nothing to see here.
Well, one thing we do know, I think one thing we can be pretty confident of is that Mandelson's got info on lots of other people.
Yes.
And it may be that Mandelson ends up committing suicide in prison or something. And that'll be the end of being able to, pin the blame on anyone else.
Blimey.
You know, this often happens, doesn't it?
Well, things are getting quite tasty there. Listen, we've got to take a short break. Can we keep you in position? Have you got another 15 to give us, Ben?
Of course, yeah, delighted to.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, Ben's going to be here as well as me on the other side.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, welcome back. Let's just scuttle through some messages and then get Ben's take on things. Morning, Alex. I hope Ollie Robbins' electronic devices don't get stolen, says Paul in Middlesbrough. Well, he just has to walk up Oxford Street and he can almost guarantee that conveniently happening. Alex, as somebody who went through various levels of security vetting over a 30-year period and up DV to level, I can categorically tell you, I suppose that's developed vetting, right? I can categorically tell you there's not a snowball's chance in hell that Starmer was not informed that Mandelson had failed his vetting. At the very least, the security services would have reacted to his subsequent appointment following his failed vetting by directly informing the PM. It was a matter of national security. Starmer had to have known. Not just Starmer. The Foreign Secretary at that time, namely David Lammy, had to have known. Even forgetting all of this, the fact a British Prime Minister didn't know his ambassador to the USA failed his vetting sums up where we are. What the hell do we have running the country? What will it take to bring this government down? Will someone please explain why we have illegals rocking up on our shores and given everything? Meanwhile, hardworking people are having to queue for hours to give their biometrics at airports to travel to enter Europe. Can I dinghy across to France and skip having to get my biometric ID, says Jules in Nuneaton. Well, the answer to that, my friends, is EU. But let's go back, Ben, to the whole Starmer Mandelson furore. This is the thing. There is no way in hell that it's an inconsequential process. You know, that's a bit like saying, well, someone's being appointed for a very sensitive position. They need to go through this check. And then when they fail, just go, oh, well, never mind. Let's just ignore that then, shall we? Someone somewhere has decided that Mandelson has to get the role, no matter what, at any cost. And I want to know who that person is, because it ain't Ollie Robbins. He was appointing after the fact. You know, who is
I'm
the
delighted
person?
Ollie Robbins is sacked.
Right, well, Ollie Robinson's
has
gone. He's been sacked because they need a fall guy. They need a distraction.
Yeah,
They
but he was
say,
an
look,
awful
over
man.
here, it must be this. Is everyone else failing the system? Who? That's what I want to know.
Well, that's the $64 million question.
Is that with inflation? It's no longer 64,000.
Yeah, it's $64 billion question. That's like Austin Powers. Anyway, let's not be frivolous. No, that's the pertinent question. Who's pulling the strings? Who is making these things happen?
Well, this is... Yeah. I think, and you know, this is where you look at the legacy media and their laziness at talking about this stuff. The fact that there is, I remember once upon a time, you couldn't walk out of 10 Downing Street with someone shouting, resign, when are you going to resign? Are you going to resign? No one is picking into any of this. I thought it was astonishing when Richard Hermer, some geezer, from his mate, Starmer's mate from one of the barristers' chambers that loves a bit of human rights, who, when you look at the rap sheet of all the people he's represented, couldn't be more unsuitable to the role of Attorney General, because every case he had taken to date seems to be against the government of Britain, when he's now being put in position to represent the government of Britain.
And he was representing terrorists.
Right.
Representing terrorists against our government.
Yes.
And as Attorney General, he's been trying to change the law so that these same terrorists can bring actions for damages against the British state. Yeah. This is the state of our own government. This Troubles Bill, which they're bringing through, will enable people like Jerry Adams and others who've committed terroristic acts against the United Kingdom to bring claims against British soldiers who were doing their duty. You could not make this up. No. It is absolutely disgusting. Not only are our veterans treated appallingly, they are now being put in the line of fire again through the courts with 2020 perfect armchair comfy decisions being made by judges who weren't there when these actions had to be taken in the face of deep danger. It is absolutely foul. Hermer, I'm so glad you brought Hermer up. Of course, he's right behind the Chagos deal.
Right.
Hermer is behind the reparations claim that people wish to make against the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Hermer is against this country.
But
and
he
that's
always
why
has
I've
been.
said
This is what
he
I'm
always
saying,
has
Ben.
been.
His entire career to date had been representing ne'er-do-wells against the UK government, and then he's not even elected. He's appointed from that as your backstory to become the Attorney General. It's like appointing Hitler to run your kindergarten. You know, it's just mad. You couldn't think of someone more unsuitable for the role. And then again, you have to ask why and who. And the advice he's given so far, well, you can't intercept the shadow fleet. That might not be legal. Hermer. It was Hermer behind all the show trials when everyone was put in prison for things, you know, tweeted out. Was it his advice that said, oh, you can legally cancel elections? Apparently you can't. Again, you know, you mentioned the Chagos Islands. Again, the decisions being taken by this man were very predictable. If you'd looked at the work he had done to date, you know, whose side is he on? Not on the UK government side. And making this man Attorney General out of nowhere seems to me an utterly astonishing manoeuvre, and yet nobody is asking about it.
No, and it's this programme, or at the beginning of this section, actually, Ed Miliband is doing as much damage to our energy security as the Iranians are. You know, we have gas, we have oil. We are turning our back on it. We've got coal, 187 billion tons of it. We've turned our back on it. We've created our own Hormuz catastrophe without the Iranians lifting a finger.
Yeah.
And
we have self-Hormuzed.
We've self-Hormuzed, exactly. But someone needs to also tell the Prime Minister that now the President of the United States of America has ordered the blockade of Hormuz himself. And I think that was a brilliant, brilliant strategic tactical step. It has absolutely taken the wind out of Iran's sails.
Well, yeah, it's two can play that game, isn't it? You want to stop stuff going to Europe. We're going to stop your stuff going to your mates. Oh, guess what? You're not going to make much money anymore, are you, Iran? Yeah. I agree. But again, we had this government saying to America, you can't use your air bases. Who was sitting there coming up with that on a legal basis? Well, I can imagine a few choice picks, the same people who aren't told when vetting is failed. But it's... I've never known a government that so audaciously seems to act against the will of the British people, against the interests of the country itself, and keep audaciously doing this in plain sight, and then we're told, well, we've had to do it because X, Y, Z. It's the same as when Starmer said, when he was asked, well, are you going to get oil and gas out the North Sea instead of buying it from the North Sea, but via Norway? And he's like, well, you'll know that process-wise, that is up to my energy secretary, who's, you know, in some oubliette somewhere. It's like, you are the Prime Minister. You can turn around and say to your energy secretary, I want you to blimmin' get the oil and gas out stat, sunshine, because the country needs it. And if he says, well, I'm not prepared to do that and it's up to me and no one else but me, you sack him. You sack him.
Yeah. Well,
the buck stops with the Prime Minister. You're
suggesting this very novel concept that they should be governing in the interests of the British people. This is not a concept which has clearly had first brush with anyone in the Labour Party. They're governing under some very extreme ideologies: mass immigration, net zero, hollowing out our military, taking us into the communist European Union, doing everything that is damaging to this country, giving away our strategic assets, not standing with our natural allies, and so on and so forth. Everything they do is anti-British.
Everything, but it's been this way for a long time. What can we do, though, Ben? That is the big question. I mean, they're going to take a bludgeoning, one assumes, during these May local elections, many of which they didn't want to even take place, but guess what? They are. But when other people have said, well, you know, they're going to have to go, they're going to fail so dismally, they're going to crash the economy, they're going to, you know, we could have blackouts, food shortages, planes might not take off. I mean, you know, we're basically going to be facing some sort of political Armageddon in the very near future. And yet, because by technicality only the Labour Party can choose to shop themselves, it's not going to happen, is it?
No, I don't think turkeys vote for Christmas. So no matter how bad the situation gets, I think if there was a possibility of the IMF being able to rescue us, then the IMF may, in the event of an economic collapse, expect, call for a new election, change of government, etc. But the extent of the economic troubles that we face are so large that not even the IMF can rescue us. If we have an economic collapse, which I think is very firmly on the cards, I'm surprised it hasn't already happened. But if we do have an economic collapse, this government will still hang in there. They'll still hang in there and brazenly hold their position. I don't think there's going to be any election before 2028, 2029. And when it comes, we've just got to make sure this government, the Greens, the Liberal Democrats, don't get anywhere near office.
I agree. We just need to... It's 11th hour, quite frankly. We need the suffering to end. Please, who will rid us of this regime? Ben, thank you ever so much. A spicy conversation, as per always. Right, what are your thoughts on what is going on? Lots of messages coming in. If you see my eyes averting over here, it's because there's so much to read. You are absolutely bombarding me with brilliant content. Keep it coming. 0344 499 1000 is the number that you can dial if you want to have a chit-chat with me later on in the show. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message. 8722 is the number if you'd rather send a text. If you're going to text, write the word talk before you send your message. OK, we're taking a short break. But then I suppose the most immediate concern that Starmer has gone into the bunker to try and circumnavigate, one assumes, is whether he misled the House. Does it have to be willful? Could it be accidental? What does this mean? Is he going to face the same fate as Boris Johnson when he was accused of lying to Parliament? Well, after that, we've got Amir Katecha, CEO for Centre for Government Reform and a former diplomat, to help us unpick and maybe answer some of those facts. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
When that Peter Bleksley is back from doing his theatre tour, I think this is what he should be investigating. Who wanted Mandelson so badly in that role that it was the price worth paying? Who really is running the show? Is it Starmer? Or does he have masters above him? Who are the shadowy Svengalis, the Rasputins rattling around the corridors of power? That is what I want somebody to answer for me. And I think this has to be done forensically. I think it has to be done by a detective, essentially. What's interesting, isn't it? What is going on in the investigation into Mandelson? He's been bailed. How's that getting along, I wonder? I wonder how much more spicy things can get. Well, quite a lot. Oh, here we go. So many messages, Starmer and his government are not in charge. We all know it. Everyone knows it. And then lots of people suggesting it's, well, you know, pick something from the drop-down menu of BlackRock to the World Economic Forum to, it goes on and on and on. But it definitely does feel at times that it isn't clear who is calling the shots. We certainly know who's taking the rap for it. So far, not the Prime Minister. Is that about to change? Let's speak now to Amir Katecha, CEO for the Centre for Government Reform. Amir, great to have you on the programme.
Hello.
Let's try and get into the nitty-gritty of parliamentary procedure, government procedure, and whether or not Starmer has misled Parliament. If he has, what are the consequences? What is the process?
Well, thanks. I mean, look, he clearly is emphasising at every opportunity that he was not informed about this until this week, and he's saying that for a reason, because if he was informed earlier than this week, he stands accused of knowingly misleading Parliament. So it was interesting, actually. I think it was Darren Jones was saying that this morning. He was obviously saying that Starmer did not knowingly mislead Parliament, but he was also saying Starmer did not unknowingly mislead Parliament. I think we'll see if that line lasts in the coming days, because clearly Starmer did say that the full process and due process had been followed. Missing out, the key fact that actually Mandelson had failed the vetting, and that he'd only managed to take up the role because that had then been overruled by the chief official in the Foreign Office.
Is it plausible that the Prime Minister and all ministers were just not informed that Mandelson failed vetting? Because an appointment such as American ambassador is a political appointment. It is it goes all the way to the top. It's not sort of, oh, let's get someone to be the sort of deputy secretary of in the embassy of Nicaragua. It is a very political appointment, and the choice of the subject was a very political choice. So what is the likelihood then that A, he was not informed that he had failed vetting, but more astonishingly, given that this has already come up in Parliament, that he's had to address the House about this on the record, and that was months ago now, in the time between today and that happening, when he turned around and said that, proper protocols were followed, that during then and now he hadn't been told.
Yeah, look, I don't find it plausible, to be honest. I think it's a very, very big decision to overrule a decision by the vetting officers. I mean, in the vast, vast majority of cases, what the vetting authorities say goes. And if you fail that process, you're not going to be taking up the job, because the whole point of this vetting process is that it enables you to see top secret information, and that is very important for an ambassador to have a rounded understanding, for example, of what's going on. So it's the vetting process is there for a reason, and for Ollie Robbins to overrule that, it's such a big decision. I find it very, very implausible.
But this is the thing, Ollie Robbins
consult with others.
Ollie Robbins was appointed after Mandelson was appointed. Now, you'd think if the Foreign Office, whoever's in charge of this, whoever the person is who knew that Mandelson hadn't passed that vetting, the most likely person I'd imagine they'd pick up the phone to isn't necessarily the Prime Minister himself, but it'd be the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, who now has resigned, disappeared into the wilderness, Lord knows where, and conveniently lost his phone.
Yes, I mean, as you say, they could have informed Morgan McSweeney, they could have informed another political advisor in Number 10. It's possible they could have informed the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, or one of David Lammy's SPADs. But as you say, it's surely... It stands to reason that someone would have been informed, because I don't see why Ollie Robbins would unilaterally want to make that huge call to overrule the decision of the vetting officers without consulting with his political masters.
So this is what's astonishing. We're being led to believe that it was sort of civil servants who decided they wanted Mandelson so badly they were going to overrule the vetting and then not tell the government that they had made that decision to overrule the vetting. Anonymous civil servants that we don't know the names of. I mean, where do we go from here? Because Starmer's clearly in his bunker trying to figure out much the same. He's well practised in the art of trying to represent or defend the indefensible. But are we going to see a situation where the Standards Committee is called up, where he's hauled in front of a select committee? We know that the Foreign Affairs Committee has written to Ollie Robbins asking that he gives evidence next Tuesday on the vetting of Lord Mandelson. Well, you know, Ollie Robbins, in theory, when he's called in front of a select committee, is going to have to tell the truth. You know, whatever's asked of him, he's going to have to answer. You would think that it's going to have to be the same for Starmer at some point. What is the protocol from here on in?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we will hopefully learn more when Starmer speaks to the House on Monday, though I should say it seems a long time to wait, to wait until Monday to give that statement. We then might find out more when Ollie Robbins speaks to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. But I do think that, Number 10 must be hoping and praying that there isn't a smoking gun that Ollie Robbins is going to reveal at that select committee.
Someone's got a smoking gun, though, because somebody, as we're led to believe by what is coming out from the government, the decision was taken to overrule the fact that he had failed vetting and put him onto developed vetting. And the decision was also taken that they were not going to tell ministers about this. This is what we're being asked to believe. So who is the person? Because that person should be easy enough to identify who it was in the Home Office, or the Commonwealth and Development Office, rather, who decided it didn't matter he failed the vetting and decided that this mustn't be told to not just the Prime Minister, any relevant government minister. That person, if we're to believe this happened, that person exists. Who is it then? Show them. Bring them.
Yes, and yeah, I mean, I don't know who that person is, but surely that's something Ollie Robbins is going to be asked. You know, who else, in terms of officials, was relevant here, was part of these conversations? But I do think, you know, there's a very unsavoury approach, I'd say, by Number 10 to this, which is really pointing the finger at the civil service and the deep state and trying to make out as if this is all the fault of the deep state. And I've had all sorts of criticisms of the Foreign Office and civil service leadership since I left. I was myself a Foreign Office official until 6 weeks ago. But it's not right to throw them under the bus if actually they did do their job and they did inform the right people. And so that's, I think, what I find very disheartening about Number 10's approach. We'll find out the truth, hopefully, in the coming days. It's right that officials are held to account. You know, for too long, we've had this idea that only politicians can be held to account. I think that's wrong. Senior officials must be accountable, but it's not right to throw them under the bus if actually the problem here lies with Starmer or those around him in a political capacity.
Are we going to get to the truth, do you think? Because it seems to me this has gone on for, months and months and months now. It's been a pantomime of obfuscation. It's been deliberate evasion. It has been the curation of reality by very well-versed, tactical and clever lawyers. Are we going to get to the truth? Is he on borrowed time?
I don't know. It's clearly a grave scandal afflicting the PM. I can't say whether, I don't think any of us can say whether he's going to survive this. But I do think there's lots of questions. And one other question I would just add into the mix here, and I hope the Foreign Affairs Select Committee asks, is why was there such a determination to make Mandelson the ambassador? I mean, there were plenty of people that could have done that job. We had Karen Pierce, who was the existing ambassador in Washington, was doing a very good job, very highly respected, and was called the Trump Whisperer because was very good at getting into the White House and getting the ear of the president. So, there were plenty of people that could have done the job. But Starmer and Morgan McSweeney and then those in Number 10 seemed absolutely determined that it would be Mandelson that does it. So I think we should get an answer, hopefully, to that
I agree.
Well.
It's the why and the who that I think are the most important questions to ask now. Let's have a watch of Sir Ollie Robbins being quizzed back in November last year by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee about Mandelson's appointment.
Did the FCDO have a different view about who should be recommended for the posting? I think by the time we're describing, it was clear that the Prime Minister wanted to make this appointment himself, and had therefore I understand that the FCDO was informed of his decision and acted upon it, and via the Foreign Secretary sought and obtained the King's approval for the appointment. But we were, in this particular case, as Chris has explained, the Prime Minister took advice and then formed a view himself, and we then acted on that view.
I mean, that's interesting, isn't it, Amir? Because it's very clear that Ollie Robbins has said previously, when called up in front of the Select Committee about this, the Prime Minister wanted to make this appointment himself. Ollie Robbins has pointed the finger directly at Starmer and said he wanted Mandelson. He is the who in all of this that wanted Mandelson at any cost. And then he says, and that was via David Lammy, who then made the recommendation to King Charles. So I think we now seem to, at least what Ollie Robbins said back in November, he says, well, we were acting on the instruction of the Prime Minister.
Yes, I mean, look, there's no doubt that Mandelson was pushed by the politicians. I mean, the civil servants always want one of their own. They want a career diplomat to take up that ambassadorship. And if it's going to be a political appointee like Mandelson, it's always something pushed by the politicians. So I think that's absolutely fair to say that it was Starmer and Morgan McSweeney pushing for this.
If that's the case, there would be no motivation for the civil service to then say to Starmer, oh, you know you wanted this particular person as your political pick. He didn't make it. Sorry, pick someone more appropriate. There is no motivation for them covering that up.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think officials would cover it up. I mean, the only plausible explanation is if Starmer or those in Number 10, so his SPADs, if they had sort of made clear that they almost did not want to know in order to protect the Prime Minister. So it's possible that, Ollie Robbins did not tell them, did not tell Starmer, because he was led to believe that actually the Prime Minister did not want to know because he was better protected not knowing. I guess that is a possibility, but it's just speculation.
It seems a strange move to make. We've got better protect the Prime Minister and go against national security. I can't see on the balance of things why anybody right-minded who is of a civil service background would think that that is the way forward. The only explanation I've got is the call went to his chief of staff, not directly to him, and said, look, listen, mate, he didn't pass the vetting. McSweeney has said, shh, let's not tell Starmer. It's going to go through anyway. And that's why McSweeney's gone and his phone with him, because he's the only one, perhaps, with the vault, the cache of secrets. What would your organisation, Centre for Government Reform, do to ensure that something like this just couldn't happen?
Well, look, I think this is just the latest example that shows the dysfunction, frankly, in so much of Whitehall. So this new organisation that I've set up with two former government ministers is all about getting outsiders, getting fresh talent into the system. I think the problem is Whitehall at the moment is a closed shop, and as I say, it protects its own, but it's also just quite stale. You need people, I think, that have excelled in the real world, running successful companies, professional outfits, tech entrepreneurs. You need these people coming into government, because I think at the moment what we're seeing is it's just, frankly, the machine is not up to scratch. I mean, this is the latest scandal, but to be honest, we've had so many over the months and years, and I think Whitehall is generally quite badly run. It is not a well-run organisation, and this sort of dysfunction, I think, frankly, people on the outside can scarcely believe it. Right? This is meant to be a Rolls-Royce machine. At least that's how the British civil service was always described. I think we need to be honest with ourselves. It's not. So this organisation I've set up is to try and improve, to be honest, the calibre of people we have in government.
Well, all strength to your elbow. It seems like a brilliant proposition. Amir Kotecha, thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'm sort of thinking the civil service is a bit like, the sort of proverbial pair of jeans that haven't been washed. in such a long time that it just sort of stands up by itself. The civil service is 2/3 bigger than it ever was. So basically 3 times the amount of people. There is so much bureaucracy, so many quangos, so many regulations, so many critical race theory training sessions, DEI appointments, HR managers, pensions that need to be honoured, golden handshakes, you know, lifelong contracts, all the rest of it. That I rather think the civil service is a bit like a desperately unwashed pair of jeans, that you could basically remove all the sensible, reasonable thinking people from it and the machine will just operate. It will still stay standing. So bloated is it now. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm beginning to get somewhere with this Mandelson thing, you know. I think I'm beginning to... It's got to go back to that, you know. If the phone call ever happened to say he didn't pass vetting, it must have gone to the Chief of Staff, who's no longer there. Now we know why he's not there, and now we know why that phone has disappeared, because it will never be proven that the call went from A to B, and then it never got passed on. But someone somewhere made that call, right? Someone somewhere must have done or decided not to make that call. That is the person that needs to be hauled in front of a cross-party committee, albeit Intelligence and Securities Committee or the Foreign and Commonwealth Defence Committee. Right, let's take a little break. When we come back, we're joined by Andrew Allison, Head of Campaigns for Popular Conservatism. We're going to be asking him about whether or not Reeves is going to, well, do what she says and ramp up drilling in the North Sea. Someone, don't tell Ed Miliband. That's after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, welcome back. Now, let's speak with Andrew Allison, Head of Campaigns for Popular Conservatism. Look, we were getting you on to speak about other things, but it would be rude not to ask you about Peter Mandelson. What's your take on what's gone on here?
I don't quite know what to make of it. I saw a tweet by Tom Watson, former deputy leader of Labour this morning, that said Keir Starmer's many things, but he's not a liar. And I have a feeling that he may not be lying here. But it really does make you wonder what is going on at the heart of government, that you can make an appointment to the British ambassador to the United States, appoint a person who has failed security vetting and not even tell the Prime Minister. And not even just the Prime Minister, Alex, not even tell the then Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who apparently didn't know anything about this. And Ollie Robbins would have you believe, not Ollie Robbins, Morgan McSweeney, rather, would have you believe that he didn't know anything about it. Everyone is denying any knowledge of this, but somebody did know. But it wouldn't surprise me with the civil service if they did try to keep this secret. But I do think that Starmer's defence is a little implausible. And I'm not sure that he's telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
It's interesting because, you know, if Tom Watson's assertion is correct that our Prime Minister is not a liar and that he wasn't told, it harks back to a theory I have long held, actually, which is he is the front man, he is the pick, he is the sort of rather innocuous seeming lead singer of an otherwise shadowy band whose players we're not really aware of, which has long been my suspicion, that we have a cabal of Lord knows who actually pulling the strings, puppet masters, and Starmer's been their pick. He's doing their operations on their behalf, it would seem. But I suppose, well, everything comes out in the wash eventually.
If I just come back very briefly on that before we get into the other subject. I mean, Keir Starmer believes in international law, or the rule of international lawyers, more importantly, in all of this. So that is how he thinks. That is how he behaves. And we've seen this with Chagos, haven't we? There's no reason why not only should we hand over Chagos to Mauritius or even pay them for the privilege, no reason for this, but he's trying to follow some form of international rules-based order. That is Keir Starmer. So I don't think he really acts in the national interest at the best of times.
Well, I'd certainly second that one. Talking about acting in the national interest, apparently Rachel Reeves has said Britain will step up North Sea drilling to combat the energy crisis triggered by the war in Iran. She's looking at faster ways to exploit the basin's oil and gas as quickly as possible. But what I find utterly astonishing here is they're pointing at, well, it's the Strait of Hormuz, well, it's Russia. These are the reasons energy prices are so high. No, they're high because we've let ourselves be vulnerable to the whims of international markets, because we're having to buy it from third parties who can charge a premium whenever there is a disaster. The point of a government is to create resilience, to defend the realm. And a huge part of that, without a doubt, must be some degree, at the very least, of self-sufficiency when it comes to energy.
Rachel Reeves is utterly out of her depth as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Alex. I think she's utterly incompetent. But even she realises that Mad Ed Miliband's pursuit for net zero is hugely damaging to the British economy. And what you haven't mentioned during your little time there speaking to me was that I've sorry lost my train of thought, but it will come very quickly.
Do you want me to rumble on while you get it back?
Taxation is what I'm about to say. You haven't mentioned taxation, which is more than 50%, for example, of the cost of a litre of diesel or a litre of petrol. So the government could go around complaining, for example, high energy prices. It's their policies, it's their net zero policies, it's the taxation that goes onto it that gives us such expensive energy.
No, indeed, you're right. And also, it's interesting. She'll be sitting there going, well, this is a bit convenient. It's a bit like that budget where she went out telling the world months in advance that we were in dire straits. It was going to be very difficult. Things were very ugly, which would have scared away any investment in the UK. Perhaps, though, buying some of our sort of, gilts on the cheap because we're such a crackpot economy at the moment. But then she turned around and suddenly went, oh, turns out it was all good after all and we can afford to lift the two-child benefit cap. Ching, ching. They constantly obfuscate. They give us a picture entirely different so they can continue squeezing us from as much money as possible for their crazy global socialist enterprise. Oh, Andrew, when will we be rid of this troublesome regime? That's what we're all asking, I'm sure, listening to this programme. Head of Campaigns for Popular Conservatism, Andrew Allison, thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'm pretty sure this subject is going to be the top topic of discussion with the brilliant Trevor Kavanagh just after this forthcoming following break, we're then going to be speaking to a former clerk of the House of Parliament, Elliot Wilson, about the procedures tied up facing Sir Keir Starmer. And will it be curtains for our Prime Minister? He, of all people, might know about those protocols. So a lot to stay tuned for. Get yourself a cup of tea and I'll see you in just a short moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, who wanted Mandelson? Who? Why? Who? Why? That's all I care about right now. Those two questions. By the way, bit of breaking news now, which is police in protective gear are investigating ongoing incident in Kensington Gardens. Met police officers in protective clothing are assessing a number of discarded items. As a precaution, some of the officers who have been deployed are wearing protective clothing, said the Met in a statement. We recognise this may concern local residents and the wider public. We do not believe there to be any increased public safety risk at this stage. But we urge people to avoid the area while officers carry out their work. Now, I can tell you this much. Kensington Gardens, that is sort of that's the part of Hyde Park around Kensington Palace, which at once upon a time was when where William and Kate lived, but not anymore. But it also is very close to the Israeli embassy. Counter-terrorism policing in London are aware of a video that was shared online overnight in which a group claimed to have targeted the embassy of Israel with drones carrying dangerous substances. Oh. I wonder which particular group that might be. Which country doesn't like Israel, is really good on drone warfare, and has a foreign arm which currently is not prescribed by the United Kingdom? Answers on a postcard, please. So there you go. Typical day in London. Right, let's get back to chewing over what is going on with Mr. Mandelson. And I've got the perfect companion to do this with. I can't think of anyone better. If only we were down the pub with a pint. It's the brilliant Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. Trevor, who decided that Mandelson was worth this risk? Because at the end of the day, that is, to me, the most important question. Someone's decided this. At any cost, we need Mandelson. And why? Why did it have to be him?
Well, the short answer is that person is Keir Starmer. And everything that he's said in defiance of that obvious statement of fact is complete lies. I mean, I can easily say this because I'm not in Parliament, and therefore I'm not going to be rapped by the Speaker. But who is going to believe a word that this unscrupulous Prime Minister is saying on this subject? I mean, it doesn't add up whichever way you look at it. The thing is that Peter Mandelson, or PT or Mandy, whichever name you want to use, was appointed as the ambassador to Washington in December last year. So Ollie Robbins, was not appointed until January, during which time the vetting process was still underway. But by that time, Mandy was in Washington as our ambassador. And by the time we discovered, or the civil servants discovered, that he was a wrong 'un, which everyone knew anyway, it was too late to stop him. Now, it is impossible. I spoke to someone who is a former Mandarin himself, and of the old school of absolutely scrupulous integrity. And he told me this, that it is inconceivable that any Mandarin would judge the failure of vetting in a case as high profile as this not to be worth informing the Prime Minister. It cannot be true that data protection prevented this. After all, if the Foreign Office had decided not to ignore the vetting and the outcome of the vetting, they would have had to explain to the Prime Minister why they were turning down his chosen appointment.
I think you're right about this. You know, the process of vetting is a process with a consequence. Otherwise, don't bother doing it. And so the consequence was he failed. He shouldn't have been appointed to the role. I would imagine what could have happened is the phone call might not have come from whoever in the Foreign Office, you know, had to break the news he didn't pass the vetting. It might not have gone directly to Starmer, because Prime Ministers are busy people. Might have been in a summit, might have been in PMQs, might have been doing one of a number of things. That phone call would normally land at the desk of the Chief of Staff, who conveniently is no longer in the role, who conveniently lost his phone, who conveniently misreported the location where he lost his phone to the other side of London, who then conveniently, when he did report it, had all the messages wiped, who then conveniently, now we know, oh, turns out I misreported where it was taken, is beyond the remit of most CCTV cameras, which have now been wiped. I mean, you know, multiple dogs are eating lots of homework right now.
Yes, and Mr. McSweeney, the gentleman you're referring to there, was the prime mover and very, very close friend, of course, of Peter Mandelson, the prime mover in the appointment of him as ambassador. What a coincidence. This is something that is going to run and run, because nobody believes a word that Starmer is saying, and nobody's believed a word that Starmer says since he was actually elected prime minister. But when you have someone like Sir Jonathan Powell, who is, after all, our national security advisor and was at the side of Keir Starmer through his premiership so far, actually warning that it was a bad idea for Mandelson to be appointed ambassador. Someone, indeed, who has known Peter Mandelson intimately for decades, then you'd think that any Prime Minister with an ounce of sense would pause and listen.
I mean, someone's just messaged me now saying, I've just read the Cabinet Office report regarding the appointment of Mandelson as US ambassador. It's pretty damning for Starmer, as he was told in writing about the relationship with Epstein back in December 2024, including staying in his property whilst Epstein was in prison in June 2009. The report is available to download. I mean, this is what is so astonishing about this. He's expended a lot of political capital on Mandelson. Why? You know, because a lot of people messaging in things I'm not going to necessarily read out, because some people have their own choice theories about what's gone on, normally relating to blackmail about people's private life and so on and so forth, and I don't want to start speculating in such uncharted territory. But it does seem so odd that, you know, why? There's got to be another reason why Mandelson was so important for that role in the eyes of Starmer, or in the eyes of whoever it is that might also control Starmer. Who's running this country?
Well, it certainly isn't Keir Starmer, is it? The fact is that Mandelson has a peculiar reputation as the arch manipulator, the Prince of Darkness, the man who can deliver things that other politicians simply cannot. I mean, it's a false reputation, totally invented by Peter Mandelson himself, but it's been incredibly successful in persuading people that he can do and get away with almost anything. And the truth is that he has almost got away with lots of things, but in every single instance, he eventually comes crashing down, as he did twice as a senior minister, the closest minister to the Prime Minister then, Tony Blair, and has since come to grief with a huge number of leaks and evidence that people have known or suspected for a very long time, not least of which was his very close relationship with the Russian aluminium tycoon Deripaska, Oleg Deripaska. And that should have raised alarm bells. When he was European Commissioner for Trade, he actually lifted the trade embargo on Russia, which was banned from dumping aluminium exports in Britain. And he actually visited Deripaska's aluminium works in Siberia before doing so. Now, if those aren't warning signals of the most alarming kind, I cannot imagine what would be. And, you know, for Starmer to ignore them is an act of stupidity and arrogance.
We also know, of course, that in those Epstein files, Mandelson was having a, with this close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, saying, well, look, when I'm over in China, I'm going to have to go a bit AWOL. I've got to get out of the grip of the officials, the apparatchiks, so watching my every move. I've got to go have my own extracurricular activity with Chinese businessmen on the side here. The connection seems to constantly come back to communism, basically, communist countries, and a government who certainly have a number of people who seem to be very keen on generating relationships with particular communist countries. China especially, the mega embassy, the Chagos Island, the list seems to go on when it comes to their keenness for a new golden age of China. And then the connection goes back to someone else who had a great love of the golden age of China, Mr. Osborne, who was wining and dining Mandelson not long ago. I don't want my imagination to run wild, Trevor, but it is. I'm beginning to think that there are many people connected to this government in particular, and frankly previous governments, who might be in the pockets of hostile states.
Well, I think that there's good grounds for some of those suspicions in some particular cases. And I don't want to name them on air, but there's no doubt that there are justifications for those suspicions. The thing is, Alex, as you will know very well, socialism, which is what this government stands for, is a pale pink version of communism. It is an ideology which believes in the supremacy of the state above the individual. Individuals and people generally don't count in comparison. And, you know, the ruthlessness that goes with that has to be seen to be believed. And in fact, the corruption goes hand in hand with that sort of power. And the corruption that this government has been exposed of, and who knows what's going on behind the scenes that we'll learn of at some time in the future, just beggars belief.
Does the Prime Minister himself have to undergo vetting? Because I'm pretty sure, we both know that Sir Keir Starmer took a very interesting gap year. Off he went to Czechoslovakia, to a Soviet workers' camp, which, isn't your normal let's go interrailing around Europe and see some art galleries and get high on wine and song. It's a funny pick by anyone's standards. He was also in some pretty radical communist legal organisations as a young barrister. You would sort of think, given that we spent half of the last century trying to fight communism, that would sort of be a bit of a red flag. And I don't know whether the Prime Minister himself, considering the sensitivity of the role and it being the highest office in the land, whether he's subjected to any of these checks and balances.
Well, he's elected, so he probably isn't. But you've picked up a stone underneath which are some pretty peculiar worms. And, Jeremy Corbyn also went to Czechoslovakia with Diane Abbott on his pillion. And it is interesting to know that quite a few trade union leaders in the 60s and 70s weren't just sort of useful idiots as far as Russia was concerned. Jack Jones, who was the head of the most powerful union in the land, the Transport and General Workers, was a fully paid up member of the KGB. He was an agent of the KGB. And some others were much too close to the Russian regime of the time for comfort. And when have you ever heard any of the Labour Party ministers criticizing Russia, Putin, and in the past China and Mao Zedong and all the others, and indeed the present Chinese government in the way they deserve to be criticized and addressed? You won't.
Right, and it's actually that sort of strange pattern to me doesn't really stop in Britain. You can look at the old Iron Curtain, the former Chancellor of Germany, who was the one who served the biggest blow, the first great wrecking ball into the integrity of European borders. Angela Merkel is working as some sort of nuclear scientist in the USSR in East Berlin, and I think she's been one of the most harmful people to Europe. And I have to ask myself, is there basically now a communist cabal at the heart of Europe? Because we saw it as well with previous European Commission presidents. Barroso, he was part of the Communist Party. Like I said, we seem to spend most of the last century fighting communism in line with America. Now we've elected them.
Well, you have to remember, and I'm sure you do, Alex, that the European Union is a form of totalitarianism in itself. I mean, they do not brook disagreement. It is a totally undemocratic and unaccountable institution, and very, very powerful too. And that is one of the reasons we voted in the way we did in 2016 to leave. We wanted to be able to make up our own minds without being bullied and told what to do by Brussels. And, you know, this is something that people still, and indeed Starmer is now trying to reverse in another scurrilous and outrageous way, which is a form of deceit, which is another form of dishonesty. And so if he's lying and found to be lying to Parliament, then, you know, it's all one of a part. And an interesting thing, I think, which happened only this week is the fact that the person in Parliament who will ultimately decide whether or not Keir Starmer is tried effectively by the Parliament is the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle. So Lindsay Hoyle, very nice man, who was publicly or semi-publicly embarrassed in the House on Wednesday when he had the temerity to upbraid the Prime Minister for not answering questions put to him by Kemi Badenoch. And he was torn off a strip by Keir Starmer as he left. That may have been a big mistake on the part of the Prime Minister.
Very, very interesting indeed. So perhaps gone are the days, or was it around the Southport situation where there was a little sort of, was it Southport, where there was some sort of meeting between the two of them in an office, scurried away quickly before PMQs or something when it's decided a certain question was going to be disallowed in front of the House. I get the impression that the Speaker's been rather protective of Starmer to date. They herald from the same party, but yeah, perhaps that friendship is no longer so special. I'm going to be looking out for that one. Trevor, as always, utterly brilliant. Hey, we got a new clip of Sir Keir Starmer. He's been speaking in the last hour. He's been telling broadcasters he wasn't told that Mandelson had failed the vetting. Let's have a watch.
That I wasn't told that Peter Mandelson had failed security vetting when he's appointed is staggering. That I wasn't told that he'd failed security vetting when I was telling Parliament that due process had been followed is unforgivable. Not only was I not told, no minister was told. And I'm absolutely furious about that. What I intend to do is to go to Parliament on Monday to set out all the relevant facts in true transparency so Parliament has the full picture.
I don't even know what to say about this. That I wasn't told that he failed vetting. Ministers weren't told. He's still keeping something from us because he knows he was told. Do you see what I mean? If he wanted to be honest, he could give us the full slate of facts right now. He doesn't need to wait until Monday. He's just done an interview. Will it be proper procedure to say it in front of Parliament first? Well, jog into Parliament now. Call an urgent meeting. I don't know. But he said, no, it is... it is, you know, telling the truth by process of eliminating inconvenient details, which I'm afraid, I think that is lying. I think omissions are lying. Secrecy is something I really cannot abide. I really, really cannot. And we know that that's what we've now got from this government, a secretive government, a sneaky, sly, secretive, self-serving, scurrilous, scandalous government. Oh, well, let's see what happens next, shall we? We're going to be kept on our toes over the coming days. I'm pleased to say I'm going to be here all week. Woohoo! That's right, I'm going to be covering the 7 till 10, so I get to be part of the action. I love it when we've got drama in politics. Right, on that note, we're going to take a short break because after it, I am delighted to say that we're going to be joined by Elliot Wilson, former House of Commons clerk. Ooh, if anyone knows the procedures and the protocols, he does, so do stay tuned.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Now, I think every single party leader, apart from Starmer himself, has called for Sir Keir Starmer to resign. Rightly so, some might say. Let's have a little look of Nigel Farage speaking to Breakfast Ian this morning.
The Prime Minister, in a big speech in Hastings, said very clearly that Mandelson had passed. He said in the House of Commons that the vetting had revealed an ongoing relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but not the extent of it. So you've got the Prime Minister publicly saying that the vetting had been done and that he knew about it, and now claiming he didn't know about it, and he didn't know there'd been a rejection. That doesn't add up. And, you know, on Tuesday, we now learn, or their excuse is that on Tuesday they were told about this. Well, if that's the case, why did he not, on Wednesday, tell the truth to the House of Commons? Yeah. It's evasion. And I firmly believe, and I really do, that the Prime Minister has not only misled Parliament, but openly lied to the country and thought he would get away with it.
Has he lied to Parliament, Nigel? Because I noticed he was very careful, wasn't he, in terms of what he said inside Parliament as distinct for things he said at Number 10. And there's a crucial difference, of course, between those two locations.
Yes, well, what was said in Parliament, of course, was read word for word of a script that had been, because he can't really do anything without a script, of course, and it was so it was very carefully done. But I still believe, I do believe that he misled Parliament, and I am certain that he lied to the country.
Well, that really is going to be the decisive factor when it comes to the fate of the Prime Minister, one would assume. But what is the protocol? Do we think he has lied to Parliament? Who better to ask than the former House of Commons clerk for over a decade, Elliot Wilson, served in that role from 2005 to 2016. OK, Elliot, you are the professional here when it comes to things like procedure, protocol. From the outside looking in, are there question marks over the integrity of our Prime Minister and what he has said in front of Parliament?
I think there are very serious question marks about whether he has misled the House of Commons. I mean, I think we can get caught up in whether he technically lied or said something that wasn't true, but that's not really the point. He very clearly gave the House of Commons the impression that Lord Mandelson had been vetted, that the normal procedures had been through before his appointment as ambassador to Washington, and that he was satisfied that he was a suitable candidate. Now, we know that that is not true. We know that he wasn't properly vetted, or at least the vetting was turned down. What the Prime Minister is asking us to believe is that nobody told him about that. Now, I find it hard to credit in a situation and a culture where you virtually get full script from cabinet meetings with sort of stage notes about who said what, that nobody who knew that the vetting had been negative, had been that Lord Mandelson had been rejected, thought to tell anyone in Number 10, any minister, the Prime Minister, that none of them found out from any source. That seems to me extremely unlikely.
Well, I was going to say, he's doubling down on this, though. He's come out today and said in an interview, albeit not in front of Parliament, that is exactly what happened, that no minister was told, that he wasn't told. Where do we go from here? I mean, he's going to apparently address Parliament on Monday with all of the facts. I don't know why. The other big question I have is it's not like this is his first rodeo having to face down this subject in front of Parliament. There's been months. There's been basically 6 months between the last time this came up, and in that period of time, nobody told him. It does strike me as rather incredulous. What happens next?
Well, the Prime Minister said he'll give a statement to Parliament, and as you say, he says he's going to give us the full facts, but he seems to be the unluckiest person in the world. He's unlucky in the way that Jeremy Corbyn was unlucky with his friends. Just bad things seem to happen to the Prime Minister. People don't tell him things, and he has to come back to Parliament and say, oh, I found out this as well. This all seems very implausible. He has, as you said, doubled down on it. I think it's the only thing he can do now. You know, whether it's true or not, what he says, and I find it implausible at best, he's stuck with it now. That's the line in the sand he's drawn. This is his way of explaining what has clearly been a very, very messy saga, which I assume the Prime Minister must be regretting by now. Because it was his choice to appoint Lord Mandelson. There was a nominee for ambassador to Washington already in place when he became Prime Minister, Sir Tim Barrow. Tim Barrow was put aside and Lord Mandelson was sought as an alternative candidate. So this is a mess that Keir Starmer has created. And it's turned out to be rather a greater mess than even he could have conceived. Though given that it was Lord Mandelson who comes with his own set of difficulties and challenges, it was not unforeseeable.
What happens next then? Because, you know, he's going to come back, apparently address Parliament with all of the facts. We know that they're not going to be all of the facts. It'll be some chosen facts that are put together in a collage to curate a reality to Sir Keir Starmer's liking. But if he... even if it's the case that Parliament were misled, because you would be mistaken in thinking otherwise, Parliament sat there and the Prime Minister basically said the vetting was done. And so from that, you inherently draw the conclusion that it was therefore passed. You know, just admitting that is a deliberate act, I would say, and whether or not he knew. Parliament clearly was misled. Whether intentional or otherwise, does that determine the same outcome? Is he curtains?
Well, that's a matter for the House to decide. I mean, this is the problem, that he has a very large majority. It's hard to remember quite how handsome a majority he was returned with less than 2 years ago, as it's all gone so badly wrong for him. But he has a majority of, 160, 170. If the House decides that it wants to vote against him, it can do. But, it would require the opposition to put down a vote of confidence or something like that. and it would require Labour MPs to take their chances, potentially ahead of local elections when their colleagues are putting themselves forward for the public scrutiny, to then stand foursquare behind the Prime Minister. Now, they've not done that for a long time, many of them, so it would be odd to get into the habit now. But crisis does bring out strange habits in people. But, clearly, as you say, the House was not given the full impression of what actually happened, for the simple reason that the appointment was made. If the Prime Minister, if there had been a problem with Lord Mandelson's vetting, as there obviously was, it should have been something that was mentioned, or the appointment should not have gone ahead at all. But Lord Mandelson was sent to Washington as our ambassador, judged to be a fit person. That turned out not to be true within less than 6 months. And yet Sir Keir stood at the dispatch box and said it was all fine, the full due process had been observed, and that Lord Mandelson was off to Washington. So something went wrong. The House of Commons was given an impression which was not correct, and the only person who can have given that impression was the Prime Minister. So that depends then on what he told, and he was told. And if he's really as isolated from basic facts in his own government as his portrayal of it is, then there are other reasons to worry about him. I mean, do people tell him anything, or does he go in through the back door and sit in a cupboard for the working day and then go upstairs to the flat to go home? I mean, what is he doing if he's not discovering these very important things?
I thought if somebody essentially lied to Parliament, that they face their own ethical investigation that could come with a punishment such as, you're suspended for however many weeks, and then after a suspension of a particular period of time, you face parliamentary recall where your constituents are given the opportunity to say, we want rid of you, etc. Is he not going to be joining that particular conveyor belt?
It would need to be referred to the Committee of Privileges, as Boris Johnson was for his various misdemeanours. Again, it's always going to be a matter of the House, and the problem is that the House of Commons is inherently a political body. Unless you lose the support of your party, if you've got a majority as big as Keir Starmer, then you are relatively safe. But if you lose the support of your party, I think, is maybe the critical thing here, because we were already talking about whether Keir Starmer was going to survive, the next few months, weeks even, as Prime Minister. I think this has made it infinitely harder. I think the difficulty is that various members of various opposition parties are all saying he should resign, and they're entitled to do that, but they're all saying it for slightly different reasons. And I think there is a danger that the Prime Minister will dodge between the various bullets and manage not to be sufficiently wounded by any of the individual accusations. But, if he has misled the House of Commons, then for me, and I think for any person who cares about how our constitutional system works, that is enough. You should go. Our depends on honesty, and if you can't be honest, then you shouldn't be Prime Minister.
Okay, so say he isn't going to go. Who can actually go to the Committee of Privileges or the Prime Minister and say, you have to, go in front of them, and now you're going to be part of this process where we analyse all of this and draw a conclusion whether you should face a suspension? Can anyone do that, or what is the process behind that particular manoeuvre?
Can be referred by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards as well, and Daniel Greenberg. There are various ways of putting his case forward to the Committee of Privileges, and the committee does, in fairness, have, for example, lay members on it. It's not all MPs. I think for there to be not a way out of it found, as there wasn't for Boris Johnson, would demonstrate such a depth of lack of support that his position would be untenable anyway. I think it's one of these things where the formalities do exist and they can happen and they can work, but actually they're the sort of backstop of a more political process, which tends to give you more warning of the fact that your position is just not stable. The Prime Minister is there for one reason and one reason only, because he can command the support of the House of Commons. That's the only reason the Prime Minister holds that office. And if the Prime Minister can't, and if Sir Keir loses the support of enough of his own MPs, then he will have to realise that, a change must be made. The difficulty for the Labour Party is that their particular rules of leadership make it more difficult for them to change their leader than it does for the Conservative Party. They obviously found it very easy to change their leader over the past 15 years.
And finally, can Mandelson himself be summoned to give evidence to one of the various select committees, be it intelligence and security or foreign and Commonwealth development or whichever? Because he's no longer a lord, and my understanding is he's of no fixed abode either.
Yes, he does seem to have fallen into the terrible trap of homelessness, which is a tragedy to see a man of his stature. But no, I mean, he can be, yes. I mean, the rules about select committees are that they can summon anyone except MPs and members of the House of Lords. Now, Lord Mandelson is no longer a member of the House of Lords, so there is no reason why he can't be summoned to give evidence.
So how does the summons happen? Does it? One imagines it might be some sort of formal written letter going to either your office in the House of Lords, which he doesn't have, or your personal address, which apparently he doesn't have.
I mean, that's the last sort of resort. I mean, what you would do first is communicate to whoever you wanted to take evidence from that you wanted to see them. Now, the vast majority of people will do that. They'll comply, even if they're not particularly keen on doing so, because, you know, they have to do it anyway. It's only very rarely we've seen people like, for example, Rupert Murdoch and his son, you know, who've had to be formally summoned, in which case, you know, there is a legal process for serving papers. The Sergeant at Arms will serve papers on the witness. But the vast majority, you know, 99% of witnesses will come of their own accord to one degree or another, because they realise that you can't ultimately get away from it. I would have thought perhaps Lord Mandelson would want to give his own account of what happened. He seems to be, you know, quite bullish about what happened. He seems to think he's been treated quite unfairly. We know that, for example, Sir Oliver Robbins, who's now no longer the Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Office, is giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee next week. So it'll be interesting to see what his version of events is, and perhaps we can knit together some kind of plausible narrative from all of those, which is more plausible than the Prime Minister's.
Well, the latest version, of course, as well, version 2.0. Let's see if it differs from the version he gave to exactly the same committee back in November. Elliot, thank you so much for giving up your time to come and walk us through all of that. A maze, a veritable labyrinth of process. And interesting that Elliot's suggesting that he might dodge the lot of it because there's not one net trying to catch him. And so they might all clash like a mad lacrosse match. Who knows? Right, OK. We're going to be taking a short break now, but then we're going to be talking about the migrant crisis, the latest iteration, the latest chapter in that sorry tale, with the brilliant Tony Smith, who's a former head of the UK Border Force, no less. That's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, this is something I said a while ago. Glad to see it's been picked up by somebody, because I've often said about these army bases used to house asylum seekers. I'm like, they've got a perimeter fence. They've got outdoor areas. They've got a mess where people can go and eat. They've usually got a table for sport. You know, basically, this has to be secure accommodation for people in the armed forces. So why on earth, when people are put in this accommodation, are they then let out to play? Why are they given vans to go bust them into the nearest town to go and ogle at schoolgirls? Seems like a mad proposition to me. Well, apparently, army bases used to house so-called asylum seekers would be turned into detention camps from the first day of a Reform government, according to Nigel Farage. The move would require emergency legislation to circumvent human rights laws, would prevent migrants from roaming into towns if they had entered the UK illegally. That is what Nigel Farage has told The Telegraph during a visit to Crowborough in East Sussex. It would mean the town's converted military barracks, which have expanded to hold nearly 400 migrants, would instead become a detention camp where asylum seekers would not be allowed to come and go as they are currently permitted to do so. Let's speak to Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force. I said this for ages on this show. Lord knows me, but Nigel Farage listens to it from time to time. But if these bases have perimeter fences, someone once said to me, well, not all of them do. I'm like, well, build one then. Making a fence isn't that difficult. You could erect a big chicken wire fence with barbed wire scariness on top, 10 foot tall, probably overnight, if you should wish to do so. So do you think this is plausible? Because, I think this is a grand idea, but is it workable?
So, hi Alex, this is part of their plan for their Restoring Justice plan, which they published a while ago, where they said that what they want to do is overcome the legal and the logistical obstacles to stopping the boat. Now, this is a logistical obstacle that we have. It's also a legal one, but logistically, last time I was in the Home Office, couple of years ago, the detention estate was about 2,300 beds. On some days we get hundreds, if not thousands, of migrants coming across, and it has dropped a bit, but we simply cannot detain everybody. What they're saying is they're going to increase the detention estate tenfold to something like 24,000 beds. Now, obviously, you can't do that immediately on day one of a new government. But as you say, Alex, this government are already acquiring a number of former military sites, which could be converted into immigration detention centres. It will require emergency legislation because they have to be designated as a detention centre and then, inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons to make sure that they meet the necessary standards and so on. So they're going to need emergency legislation to do that. But I think what would assure communities, as you say, is that then it would not be open for illegal migrants in these camps to come out and wander around the community. They would be securely detained. The other legal problem, Alex, sorry to drone on about legal problems, but one of the biggest ones in my experience has been that if you're going to detain someone under immigration powers, that is not take them to court, but detain them pending removal, you have to show there is a realistic opportunity of a reasonably early removal. The problem we have now, of course, is that when a boat arrives in our country, they can claim asylum, they can claim human rights protection, they can claim modern slavery, all of which hit the pause button on the removal. So when you take the person to, they apply for bail and you go to court as a Home Office representative, you will say, well, no, we're trying to remove this person, but you can't say when that's going to happen because you've got all these representatives coming in, lodging fresh representatives. Quite often the bail will be granted. So they have to look at the Hardy-R Singh judgment. They have to look at the legislative framework under which we are enabled to detain migrants who come undocumented from safe countries for an indeterminate period unless they choose to make a voluntary departure. That is going to raise all kinds of alarm bells on the left, in the Lords, in the Supreme Court. So they're going to have a huge legal battle on their hands. But they've made it pretty clear, I think, in Operation Restoring Justice that this is what they want to do. And, I think that probably reflects the views of a lot of your viewers, Alex.
The problem is, this is the one thing, that people can talk the talk when they're outside of government, but once you're there in charge of the levers of power, you suddenly realise that your hand barely touches any of them, that there are so many devices, so many challenges, so many things that get in the way of the manifestation of a particular set of policies. It's a risk then that people who are, going to be sent to one of these detention camps challenges it legally and says, I shouldn't be detained because X, Y, Z, and it'll be a detention camp with about one person in it.
I don't think that's a risk. I think that's a certainty, Alex. They will immediately get a judicial review against whatever it is they're trying to do. Depends what sort of majority they get. If they win the next election, they will need a big majority. They will have to do something about the House of Lords because I'm sure it will be blocked there.
Yeah.
I worked on the Rwanda plan for a while, and it was pretty clear the opponents of that in the House of Lords, in the international community, in the courts were readily available to lodge JR after JR application to prevent any removals going to Rwanda. The same thing I fear will happen under a reform government. But I think, to be fair to them, they've looked into this, they've recognised this, they understand this, and the only way they're going to be able to do it is if they are able to command a significant majority and take really, really bold, very bold political steps. And people will need to realise that even then, I'm afraid, Alex, on day one, they won't be able to stop the boats. It will take time, but this is a useful first step. If people realise coming off the boats, they said they'll prioritise the boats, are going straight into detention and not being released in the communities, then that in itself may have a deterrent effect.
I think it probably would. But if there are going to be various legal challenges against people being put into detention centres, is there a possibility, and I'm just thinking out loud, spitballing with you here because I don't know, that instead these things are classified as refugee camps? Because when I look at refugee camps around the world, it tends to be a bit of canvas and a bowl of gruel. It doesn't happen to be a 4-star hotel and a free iPhone. So might there be a sort of opportunity to reclassify these things as refugee centres, or is that automatically granting people asylum? Because it seems to me in our system we have to sort of give people the benefit of the doubt and then prove them wrong before deporting them. Could that be a way around this, or is that opening up a whole different can of worms?
Well, the refugee camps that you describe are actually run by the UNHCR around the world, Alex, and they're the places where you would expect asylum seekers to go if they genuinely are in fear of persecution. You would, you would get out of the country you fear persecution. You would probably go to the nearest safe country you could get to, and the UNHCR are funded to provide refugee camps where you will be looked after. You will be fed and watered. They are funded for that. What the refugee UNHCR would like is for the world to come and help and take some of those really vulnerable, genuine refugees out of those camps and resettle them through resettlement programs in the West. And that's what we used to do, as did the Americans, the Canadians and the Australians. That is really picking up the issue about safe and legal routes. If you're genuinely fleeing a war and bombs are going off in your back garden and you have to escape either to another part of your own country or somewhere else, that is the business model that's been arrived at about 100 years ago and still exists. The problem is the entire business has been taken over by human smugglers and criminal gangs who will facilitate your movement across borders, exploiting immigration laws to jump the queue. So I don't think you'd be able to, do what you want to do by turning it into a refugee camp. You do need to have a detention centre. You do need to get them designated. It is a tricky process, but it can be done. But I think, you need to look, I think the reform paper needs to be Operation Restoring Justice in itself is quite a comprehensive document. They quite often get criticised for not having policies. So on this they have. I've read it myself and I've looked at it, and I think it is, but it's going to take really, really bold political will to drive it through. And people, if they do get in, will have to be patient with them, because it's not, even then, it's not going to work on day one, I don't think.
I think you're right, and you're right to bring up the blocking element of the House of Lords as well, where reform doesn't have... Do they have a Lord? Maybe they've got one or two, but I don't know. But they certainly don't have enough to prevent that particular obstruction. Tony Smith, thank you ever so much for sharing your expertise with us, former head of the UK Border Force. OK, we're going to take a short break. After that, let's wrap up the show by having a chit-chat. 03444991000 is the number to dial. Kieran is there ready to take down your details and give you a call back or keep you on the line. 8722 if you want to squeeze in a final text message, right talk before your text is or your normal network rate, etc. I'll see you just after this.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. Well, welcome to your part of the show, because this is the bit where we hang out together, isn't it? Communal catharsis. Let's speak to Matt in Cheshire. Hi, Matt.
Hi, good morning, Alex.
Good afternoon.
Sorry.
That's right.
I rang about Starmer, but just a quick one on, you asked earlier who is running Britain.
Right.
Then 5 minutes later, you did a bit of a rant about China, so you answered your own question.
Well, I think I might have been answering my own question. I think I've speculated thus far that there seems to be a number of people with connections to hostile regimes connected to an ideology that we spent most of the last century trying to fight. In fact, I've been taking little notes down. I think I might go and write my own little article on this a bit later, do some proper digging.
Who makes all the wind turbines? Who makes all the heat pumps?
Yeah.
It's basically, Ed Miliband is the link between the government and the Chinese government. On Starmer's, regardless of any paper trail, Starmer's comments in the Rose Garden show that visually and body language-wise, he is an obvious liar. Stiff as a board, with fear pouring out of his eyes.
You just picked up on something that I'd said to my producers, and I swore to myself I wouldn't say on air. I love saying things like that, because I look at the whites of Ted's eyes in the gallery and I see the beads of sweat appear on his forehead. Which, talking about foreheads, I notice when people are lying, what people suggest you look forward to is movements in the eyebrows. If you raise your eyebrows, for example, it's supposed to be one of those little tells that you might not be telling the truth. So in that statement in the Rose Garden with Starmer, I was looking for any movement of that brow, and I'm wondering if Lord Ali is funding other sort of things as well as just the wardrobe, because there wasn't much movement around here, and I don't know whether that's because he is telling the truth or whether because, I don't know, there may be destabilised muscular activity on that part of his face. Who knows? Right, Matt, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to Cliff's in Slovakia. Hi, Cliff.
Hello, Alex. We've spoken before.
I think we have, but were you in Slovakia then?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm not coming back, don't worry. So what I wanted to say first, to commend you on taking the King's Shilling and joining the forces, as I did many years ago.
Well, not yet. I am in the process. I'm in the process, and I'm doing the security vetting right now, and it takes an awfully long time. So ironically, I kind of have a bit of an insight into these things. But they might not say yes, because I haven't done my medical yet. And when they find out I'm part bionic with itchy skin and terrible eyesight, they might think I'm not fit for purpose, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, if it's according to Rachel, if you're a female, you'll have to get in.
Well, there you go. I know. I should pull out the gender card.
I don't really want to talk about this cabal that's the government, and it really isn't a cabal, because a cabal, you never get to the top of a cabal, and these are all on show as complete half-wits. But when, and I'm confident you will, join the military, you'll find that it doesn't matter what colour you are, what gender you are, what religion you follow, you become brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And you're willing to do anything for them, literally anything, even if that means laying down your life.
That's what appeals to me. It appeals to me to be, I mean, not that I'm not surrounded by patriots here in Talk Towers. I'm blessed, rather, that I do have amazing colleagues and people I work with who are all of a very similar mindset and ideology. And that's my that was what appealed to me. That, and because I love aircraft, because I'm weird. But that's what appealed to me about that. You know, just being around people who are patriots and who do want to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And for her to come out with that that we're not going to give them any money because they've got a terrible record on gender equality.
Piffle.
It is piffle, and that's the best word for it, because mine would have been a little more choice. But yeah, and the people in government, I know Starmer bent down to pick up the papers, but the rest of them wouldn't cross the road to help someone.
Oh no, I feel you're right. These people don't have Britain's interests at heart. I think that's been borne out by fact, quite frankly. Cliff, enjoy Slovakia. We'll speak again soon, no doubt. Let's rattle through some voice notes before I go off air. This is Phil.
Let's say, for example, Keir Starmer is telling the truth, as are all of his MPs, David Lammy, etc., etc., and none of them knew about this. Now, what that shows is that the MPs are not in charge. The civil service are, and therefore the civil service needs completely stripping out. Every single one of them needs firing, and therefore it all needs completely resetting and starting again. Get rid of the whole lot.
Drain the swamp, as Donald Trump would have said about the American deep state. Let's listen to Michael now.
I'm just wondering how the United States of America are feeling about this, and they're not going to be happy that we're sending ambassadors over that have been vetted and failed the vetting process, ones who have been connected with Russian oligarchs and failed the vetting process. The Yankee boys aren't going to be too happy about this. It's a double whammy, isn't it? Betrayed us and betrayed our allies as well. Disgrace.
Well, do you know, two very interesting voice notes there. There's so much more to this than meets the eye, and we know that, don't we? The full sort of weight, the feel of all of this. It's almost like variations on a theme when it comes to connections to rather choice states and decisions being taken against the British state. And I think we need to dig into it, so I'm going to quietly go and do some of that digging by myself when I come off air. Meanwhile, I'm just going to remind you of an emerging news story, some breaking news. Pictures are beginning to trickle in of police in protective gear investigating an ongoing incident at Kensington Gardens. Now, this is a particular part of Hyde Park around Kensington Palace. It is also very close to the Israeli embassy. Officers are assessing a number of discarded items as a precaution. Some have been deployed wearing protective clothing. Cordons are in place and there's no public access to the gardens. Now, interestingly, add to this that counter-terrorism police in London are aware of a video shared online overnight in which a group claimed to have targeted the nearby embassy of Israel with drones carrying dangerous substances. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be wrapped up and nothing to see here. There could well be a lot to see. Hello, Mark.
Well, the problem we've got, Alex, is it's Friday and
that's
it's
always a problem.
Slow news day. So we're going to just say, I'm going to do 3 hours, what's in my hand, right? It's for the radio listeners. It's an old radio trick. What's in my hand? And then the callers call in, they go, is it green? I go, no, it's not green. It turns out...
It's like sort of 20 questions.
Yes. In fact, of course, the opposite's the case. It's one of the biggest political stories of the year. Will Starmer make it to May? This is a Prime Minister on the brink. That's the topic of an emergency Dolan's dispatch. How much did he know? One of the scandalous suggestions is that he took PMQs in full knowledge that Mandelson had failed security vetting. This was the same PMQs in which he was admonished by the Speaker of the House for not answering the question.